Hey my cute watchers, how are you all? We won't waste any time on stupid intro, let's get straight to the video. Fuck, Harry hisses out as he wraps his newly broken ribs. He had just taken another beating from his whale of an uncle. Apparently the meatloaf he was forced to make his horrible family wasn't good enough. It was ridiculously hard to try to please that man. So here Harry sits wrapping his ribs to relieve the pain. In only 2 hours it would be his 15th birthday, and he couldn't wait. He could use magic legally, and get away from Privet Drive. Stupid Dursleys, he hissed again as he finished wrapping. He looked over to his desk and saw Hedwig staring at him. It's fine Hedwig, I will be fine, she hooted indignantly at him, and he laughed quietly. He looked over at his clock and it read 11:30 p.m. He sighed and leaned back on his bed. He wasn't expecting anything from anyone. He had found out his friends weren't even his friends. He laughed bitterly as he remembered when he found out. Flashback. He walked towards Dumbledore's office, and stopped when he heard the voices of his friends. He assumed that they had started the conversation without him, as usual, until he actually listened to what they were saying. Honestly, Headmaster, how much longer will you burden us with Harry's friendship? Hermione asked with a sigh. Hermione is right, Professor. Pretending to be his friend is exhausting. Especially with him constantly putting us into danger, like the self-righteous prat he is, Ron said with a snort. I know how hard this is for you too. But you are the key people helping him stay ignorant, and under my thumb. Without the influence of you two he could have been put into Slytherin, and would have been on the fast track to becoming a Dark Lord. Just be patient a while longer, he will be dead, and you will have his money, Dumbledore said in his grandfatherly voice. Harry peeked around the corner to see what he believed to be his only friends in the world. Huff sighs, and then nod. He sped to the 7th floor, and into the room of requirement before falling into hysterics. Flashback over. Harry growled at the memory, and heard his clock chime, signaling it was his birthday. Happy birthday to me, he whispered to himself. He laughed again, and heard a tapping at his window. He looked over and saw a Gringotts owl at his window. He got up as quickly as his ribs would let him, and allowed the owl in. Hello beautiful, he said as he took the parchment off the owl's leg. I'm sorry, all of my treats are downstairs, he said with a frown. The owl just hooted and joined Hedwig on her perch. Dear Mr. Potter, we wish you a happy birthday, and congratulate you on coming of age. Sadly we noticed a problem with your vaults, and need to consult with you. We can also go over any inheritances you may have. This letter serves as a portkey. Say the words Gold Rush, and you will be transported to Gringotts. Sincerely, Ragnarok, Gringotts Manger. Harry sighed and found the best looking of Dudley's old clothes, and threw them on. He grabbed his glasses, then the letter and whispered, Gold Rush. He felt the familiar tug behind his navel, and before he knew it, he landed gracefully on his feet in Gringotts. He politely walked up to the desk, and approached the goblin stationed there. Hello, I am here to speak to Ragnarok, he said politely. The goblin looked up a little startled, and nodded. He then yelled something in gobbledygook. Another goblin walked out towards him. Hello Mr. Potter, I am Ragnarok. If you will please follow me, we can fix this discrepancy, and go over your partial inheritance. I nodded and followed him to his office. All right, we can start with your inheritances, Ragnarok said as he summoned a dagger and a piece of parchment. Put 7 drops of blood on this parchment. Harry nodded and grabbed the dagger. He carefully sliced open the pad of his finger, and let 7 drops of blood fall onto the parchment. He watched as words were written in red ink, which he assumed was his blood. Biological parents: paternal, James Potter; maternal, Lily Evans née Potter; child, Harry James Potter; creature inheritance, unknown until 17th birthday; godfathers: Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Severus Snape; godmother: Minerva McGonagall; lordships: Potter, Evans, Gryffindor; Slytherin by conquest: Fleamont; airships: Black, Peverell; blocks: potions; magical core: 100%, 50% breakthrough: Albus Dumbledore; Parseltongue: 100%, 80% breakthrough: Albus Dumbledore; Parcel magic: 100%, Albus Dumbledore; intelligence: 100%, 70% breakthrough: Albus Dumbledore; Love potion. Heed to Ginny Weasley. 95% breakthrough. Albus Dumbledore. Loyalty potion. Heed to Gryffindors. Weasleys. Hermione Granger. Albus Dumbledore. 100% breakthrough. Hate potion. Heed to Slytherins. Malfoys. Tom Riddle. Severus Snape. Compulsions. Laziness. Hate for homework. Bravery. Glamour. Placed by Albus Dumbledore. Vaults. Potter. Black. Evans. Gryffindor. Slytherin. Peverell. Fleamont. Harry growled when he was finished reading his inheritance paper. He knew his friends were being paid but compulsions and magic dampeners. This was a new low. Before we get to your vaults I will give you your heir and lordship rings, Ragnarok said as 7 black boxes appeared on the table. The Potter ring was silver, engraved with a black Deathly Hallows symbol. The Gryffindor ring was gold, engraved with a silver lion with rubies for eyes. The Slytherin ring was white gold, engraved with a black snake with emeralds for eyes. The Evans ring was silver, engraved with a red rosé. The Peverell ring was gold, engraved with a silver phoenix. The Fleamont ring was black, engraved with a silver calligraphy F. The black ring was silver, engraved with the family crest in black. Black family crest. Harry put the Evans and Potter rings on his right ring finger and let them meld together. The Slytherin and Gryffindor rings on his left ring finger and let them meld together. The Fleamont and Peverell rings on his left index finger, they melded together. And finally the black ring on his right index finger. All right, Mr. Potter, were you aware that Albus Dumbledore, Molly Weasley, Hermione Granger, Ginny Weasley and Ron Weasley were removing large sums of money out of your vaults monthly? Ragnarok asked carefully. No, I thought they were just being paid by Dumbledore, I hissed out through clenched teeth. Ragnarok's face immediately dropped into a devilish scowl. Mr. Potter, how would you like to proceed? He asked, barely containing his anger. Please call me Harry, and I would like it all back, with interest, but please do not touch George, Fred, Bill, Charlie, Percy, or Arthur Weasley's vaults. They have never crossed or wronged me, I said with a smirk. I can do that, Mr. P. Harry. I can also have these blocks removed if you wish, Ragnarok said with a smile. Yes, please, I nodded. Ragnarok got up and gestured for me to follow him. I complied and followed him to a chamber with ruins all over the walls. He led me to a stone slab and had me sit on it. All right, Harry, I will need you to drink these 2 potions and then lie down, Ragnarok said as he handed me a baby blue-colored potion and a lavender-colored potion. I drank both quickly and then lied down. Then I heard chanting in gobbledygook. Suddenly a searing pain coursed through my body. I bit my lip to hold in the scream that was trying to force itself out of me. It felt as if every fiber of my being was being engulfed in flames. Minutes later, as suddenly as it began, the pain stopped. Suddenly my magic flared and I finally felt whole. I could feel every ounce of it flowing through my body from the top of my head to the tips of my fingers and toes. It felt as if I was a different person. I sat up panting and saw Ragnarok looking at me in shock and anger. What? I managed to get out as I caught my breath. You were writhing in pain, yet not once did you utter a sound. I am simply baffled, he said, stone-faced. Well, when I was living, we learned very quickly that screaming out in pain usually lead to more pain, I said softly. The goblin's body language exuded anger, but he managed to nod and keep his voice even when he spoke next. That should not have been a lesson you learned, he said bluntly before taking a breath. I suppose you would like to see what you like without your glamour, correct? He asked before summoning a small mirror. I gasped, and tears filled my eyes when I looked in the mirror. No longer was I a carbon copy of my father. The black unruly mop of hair I was used to was now gone. In its wake was curly fiery red hair that reminded me so much of my mother. My face was slightly sharper, but still resembled my dad's. My once emerald eyes took on a much deadlier hue, Avada Kedavra green. I smiled brightly as I looked back to Ragnarok and handed him the mirror. Ragnarok took the mirror, before again gesturing me to follow him. Let's head back to the main office, so we iron out the final details. I can answer any questions you have, he said as he began walking, and I nodded and followed him. We got back to his main office, and took our seats again as he brought my inheritance paper back out. He also grabbed 2 other blank sheets of paper out from his desk, and an emerald pouch. Okay, the first thing we are going to do is allow you to get your apparition license. I will explain how you are supposed to do it. Then have you see if you can do it without splinching. Sound good? He asked, and I nodded. He explained to me how to do it, and then asked me to apparate from my chair, to 130 feet away. I nodded and pictured myself in the chair. I felt my magic build up, and then boom, I was in the chair, and I hadn't splinched any part of my body. Very good. Now come back, he said with a nod. I repeated the process. And boom, I was back at the desk. You passed with an exceptional score, Harry. I need you to drop 7 drops of your blood on this parchment to acquire your apparition license. He says as he slides the smaller parchment towards me. I do as told, and watch as it transforms into my apparition license, which looks similar to a Muggle driver's license. Alright, Next I need you to place 3 drops of blood on this parchment, and 1 on this pouch to tie them to you, and your vaults, he says. I nod a little confused, and do as he says. This allows you to draw the right amount of currency you need form your vaults to buy things without having to come all the way back to Gringotts, he says, and hands me the pouch. Thank you, I say with a smile. He nodded. Okay, finally, do you have any questions about your inheritance? He asked, sliding the paper towards me. Yes, actually. What does it mean where it says creature inheritance? I asked calmly. Ah yes, it means that someone in your family has creature blood and it passed to you. You will come into that when you turn 17. This inheritance was supposed to happen then too, but magic works in mysterious ways, he replies vaguely. And I just nod. Thank you, Ragnarok. I will be on my way. May your gold always flow, I said as I stood up. And may your enemies fall at your feet, Harry, he said as we shook hands. Dumbledore has no idea what he has created. There you go, guys. First chapter done with new tweaks. As always, my dudes, vote, comment, share. I will see you later, my dudes. New beginnings. Parseltongue. Thoughts. I decided to get some shopping done after I left Gringotts. I was pretty sure I needed a new wand, but Ollivander's was out of the question. The only problem was, I didn't know if there was a wand shop in Nocturne Alley, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to look. I was about to cast a glamour on myself, but then I realized that I did not look like Golden Boy anymore, so I just left it. I found a wand shop in Nocturne Alley pretty quickly, but couldn't read the name of it, which for some reason did not seem very weird, so I shrugged it off, and went into the shop. As I entered the shop, a small chime sounded. A tall, lanky figure cloaked in black stepped out of a room, and behind the counter. Oh, hello, I am Octavius. I assume you need a wand. The man said as he removed his cloak. He had long gray hair half tied up, half down, brown eyes, and pale, slightly wrinkled skin. Yes, sir. However, I have a few questions before we proceed, I said respectfully. He nodded, and then gestured for me to continue. First, are these wands pre-made, or made to the magical needs of a wizard? They are made to the specifications of each wizard, he said calmly. Are they untraceable? If you wish them to be, he answered again. Okay, thank you, that is all I needed to know, I said nicely. All right, to start, I am going to set a selection of woods in front of you. I need you to wave your hand over each, and stop on the one that has the most magical pull, he said, and then set 8 types of wood on the counter. I waved my hand over them. The one with the strongest pull seemed to be dark pine, and I pointed it out to Octavius. He nodded, grabbed the wood, and then put the rest of the woods away. Then he set a large tray of items, all of which looked to be in vials, pieces, slivers, or strings. Next are the cores. Do not be alarmed if you have more than one pull. Each wand can have up to 3, and one may be liquid. Do the same as you did with the woods. I nodded and again waved my hands over the tray. 3 things on the tray had the strongest magical pulls. They were a reddish-black string, a vial of something, and a tattered piece of cloak. Peculiar, he said with a nod. I must have looked confused because he gave a smile and started explaining the cores. The cores you have picked are Dragon Heart String, Dementor Cloak, and Basilisk Venom, a very deadly trifecta of cores, he explained before setting the rest of the cores back under the counter. All right, this will take about 2.5 hours. What name should I put the order under? He asked nonchalantly. Harry Evans, I said without hesitation. Octavius nodded, before taking my course, and would with him to the back. I took that as my cue to leave. And walked out of the store. I wondered if maybe I had a familiar, and decided to head to the magical menagerie, just to check. As I walked into the store, I waved to the teen behind the counter. And gave him a polite smile. He just nodded as I explored the store. I was getting less hopeful the longer I was in the store, and felt no pull on my magic. I decided to play my trump card, and walked back to the reptile section. Almost immediately I felt a pull, and followed it to a tank at the far left side of the room. The tank was a medium-sized black and white snake. It looked to be a blue crite, but the size was wrong. I looked at the description next to the tank and saw that it was a hybrid between a blue crite and a boa constrictor. The little plate also said the snake was male, and would grow to about 10 or 11 feet long. It was obvious that this was my familiar, so I did the most reasonable thing, and decided to speak to him. Hello. The snake that had been passively watching seemed surprised. Hello young speaker, it is a surprise to meet you. I agree, do you have a name by any chance? No I do not speaker. I see, well what do you say to coming home with me, and becoming my familiar? I would like that very much, so I suppose you may choose my name. How about Loki? I asked after a few seconds of thought. Yes, I like that very much. Loki said with a nod. I smiled as I extended my arm into the tank. Loki flicked his tongue in the direction of my hand, before slithering onto it, and up to drape himself along my shoulders. He was about 3 feet long at the moment, so he fit rather well there. I made sure he was secure before walking back towards the counter. The teen looked up from the Daily Prophet, and jumped when he saw Loki draped leisurely across my shoulders. He quickly regained his composure before smacking a smile back onto his face. I see you found an animal, am I right to assume you will be taking him? Nding with a simple yes, the teen, his name tag said Neil, nodded and pulled out his wand. Do you want the supplies for keeping the snake happy and healthy? He asked again, and again I said yes. He waved his wand, and a tank, things for the tank, and a few frozen mice appeared on the counter. With the supplies, the total comes out to be 10 galleons. That seemed reasonable, so I pulled 10 galleons out of my pouch, and handed them to the teen. Less than galleons equals $25 or £19.11 greater than. He took the galleons, and put them in a pouch under the counter. He then shrank the tank and its accessories, and bag of mice into a bag, and handed it to me. Thank you. Have a nice day, he said as he went back to his newspaper. I walked out of the store, and down the street to Flourish and Blots for my school books, and any other book that caught my attention. As I roamed the shelves I noticed that there were not any advanced dark arts books, or parcel magic books, which did not surprise me. Which meant I would have to visit Borgin and Burke's back in Nocturne. I sighed, and then grabbed the books I would need for 4th year, and advanced books on all the subjects that I was interested in, that were in stock. This included potions, charms, transfiguration, runes, and defenses against the dark arts. I again walked to the counter to check out. The clerk rang up all my books, added up to be 16 books, worth 32 galleons. The clerk asked if I would like my books shrunk and put in a bag, and I simply said yes. He did so, and handed me my bag, and bid me to have a good day. I nodded, and walked out of the store. I checked my watch. I noticed that I had just enough time to get back to the Nameless Wand shop, and still be 5 minutes early, so I headed toward Nocturne. I got to the store, as expected, 5 minutes early, so I decided to look around. I noticed a shelf to my left, and realized that it had wrist holders on it. I walked to it, and examined the holsters, and I decided to get one that was black with emerald green accents. I grabbed it, and walked back to the counter. I had just set it down, when Octavius entered the room, and glided behind the counter. Ah, Mr. Evans, good to see you are on time. I also see that you have found a wrist holster as well. He smiled, and then placed a black box on the counter. I watched as he carefully removed the lid to reveal the stunning wand inside. It looked to 11 inches long, with a gray hue. It also had detailed carvings of snakes as the handle. I was amazed. Dark pine, 11 inches long with basilisk venom, Dementor's Cloak, and Dragon Heart String. Good for strong magic casting of any kind, he said in a proud voice. Very powerful wand, Mr. Evans. I do wonder how you will change the world with it, he said quietly. I just smirked. All right, with the holster. Your total comes out to be 10 galleons, Mr. Evans. I handed him the galleons, and then strapped the holster on my right forearm, and stowed my new wand in it. I tested it out, and was pleased when a small flick of the wrist sent my wand into my hand, and I was ready to cast spells immediately. I smiled, thanked Octavius, and left the store. I looked around for a couple seconds before spotting Borgin and Burks. As soon as I saw it, I made my way up the street to the store. When I entered, a chime played and Borgin appeared. He asked if I needed any help, and I told him I would let him know if I did. Before heading to the section of books, I grabbed 2 books on parcel magic, 3 books on advanced dark arts, 1 book on beginner's wordless and wandless casting, and 1 book on advanced wordless and wandless casting. I also grabbed a book about creature inheritances. I walked to the counter with my books and watched as Borgin's eyes narrowed as he read the titles of each book. A bit young for these books, aren't ya? He said suspiciously. No, I said coldly, but if you would like I can find somewhere else to get these books, I said with the same cold tone. He seemed to mull it over in his head, before continuing to ring up my purchase. 25 galleons, he said shortly. I assumed since these were darker books, they were more expensive. I gave him the money, and he quickly shrunk my books. I added them to my bag from Flourish and Blots, mostly because it had a feather-light charm on it, and it would be less suspicious. I thanked Borgin, and quickly left the store. I made my way back to Diagon to get a trunk, and a new wardrobe. I got my trunk first. It had 5 compartments, all of which had passwords on them, a feather-light charm, and an extension charm on each compartment. Finally I stopped to get clothes. I ended up with 10 t-shirts in a range of dark, muted colors. 7 sets of dress paints in gray, black and dark green. 7 pairs of jeans in dark shades. 7 silk dress shirts in black, gray, white, and dark green. 3 sets of silk pajamas in green, black, and red. 3 pairs of dress shoes. 2 pairs of Converse, and 2 pairs of Vans. 7 dress robes, again in the colors black, gray, and dark green. Finally 7 everyday robes in gray and black, dark shades of green and red. Both of these purchases were shrank, and put into bags. I fished the list of properties I owned out of my pocket, and looked over what was unoccupied. I was flabbergasted to see that Godric's Hallow had been repaired, and was livable again. I knew immediately that I would be spending the rest of my time until Hogwarts there. I summoned a long-suppressed memory of the house, warned Loki, and then apparated there. I was surprised I hadn't splinched, since my memory of this place was a tad hazy. But the house looked just as it did in the memory. As I walked up the path to the front door, Loki poked his head out from under my shirt. Master, where are we? Firstly, you can call me Harry, and we are at my childhood home. He seemed content with this answer, and slipped his head back under my shirt. I walked into the house and marveled at it. It was gorgeous in the inside. I wandered around a bit, and found that the house had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms and an attic. I walked through all the bedrooms, and found what must have been my nursery, considering there was a cradle against one wall. I transfigured the cradle into a full-sized bed, and set up Loki's things, making sure to put a heating charm on his tank as I set him in it. I also put all my purchases next to my bed. I then made my way to the hallway where the door to the attic was. I pulled it down, and unfolded the ladder to the attic. I then climbed into the attic to see old, broken furniture, and 6 boxes. I acioed them to me, and took them back to my room. I set each box on my bed before opening them up. The first box was baby clothes that I set in the corner in my closet. The second held pictures, I set up around the house immediately. I set the only big group picture in my room. The third box contained 7 plush animals, a stag, doe, grim, werewolf, snake, lion, and rat. Before I realized what I was doing, my wand was out, and the rat went up in flames. Just wait until I find the real one. I placed the remaining 6 plushes on my bed and opened up the 4th box. It contained what I first thought to be a potion set, but what I realized to be a Marauder's pranking kit. I smiled and set that next to my purchases. The fifth box was a big tattered jumper, a leather jacket, a Gryffindor scarf, and a hairpin with lilies on it. I smiled as I took each item out and set them next to my shrunken trunk. I gasped as I opened the sixth box. It contained a picture of my parent holding me, and 2 rolled-up pieces of parchment. I took the items out and set them on my nightstand. Just as I was about to unroll the first parchment, I heard pecking on my window. I snapped my head towards it, and noticed Hedwig perched on the window sill. I smiled, and then let her in. "Sorry girl, I didn't grab your cage, or perch, I will have to get you new ones." She didn't seem to mind this as she perched on the headboard of my bed. I looked back towards the window, and noticed how late it had gotten. I grabbed all the empty boxes, and carried them, then walked back to my room, resized a pair of pajamas, and got ready for bed. Today was an interesting birthday. Comment, share, vote. See you later my dudes. Dumb as a door. Parseltongue. Thoughts. The sound of Hedwig hooting woke Harry up the next morning. "What's wrong girl?" I asked as I sat up to stretch. She just nipped at my hand, and I realized she was probably hungry. "Sorry Head," I said while opening the window to let her out. After I let her out I summoned a few mice for Loki. After that I opened the box, and grabbed my mom and dad's letters. I decided to start with my mom's first. "Harry my darling son, if you are reading this, it means Dumbledore has killed us. Your father and I are sorry we couldn't be there to watch you grow up. We know that you will turn out to be a great wizard and it pains me to know that I won't be there to see it. I will love you always and forever. Whatever you decide to do, whatever side you choose, know that your father and I will always love you, and are very proud of you. But whatever you do, please stay away from Dumbledore, he is the truly evil one. I love you, goodbye darling. Sincerely, Lily Evans, your mom." I desperately tried to hold back that were building behind my eyes. Crying would do me no good at the current moment. I took a deep breath and picked up my father's letter. "Harry my son, if you are reading this, Dumbledore found us and killed us. I am sore, for not being able to watch you grow up. Your mother and I love you more than words can express. Always remember that, and you better not think this is your fault. Dumbledore is truly evil, and needed power. I know you will grow up to be a great man. Be whoever you want to be, align yourself with whichever side you see fit, and live your life to the fullest. Sincerely, James Potter, your dad." The tear flowed down my face silently as I sat on my bed in shock. They knew, my parents knew Dumbledore was the bad guy. How did Voldemort get pulled into the picture? There is only one way to find out, I thought as I set the letters on my bedside table and headed to the desk in my room. I sat down at the desk and pulled out a length of parchment paper, a quill, and ink. Time to find out how this clusterfuck began. Time skip brought to you by Nagini being majestic Tilda. 2 hours had passed since Hedwig had come back, and I sent her to deliver the message to the Dark Lord. In that time I had moved to my dad's study, and I was debating on writing a letter to Draco, or meeting him in person. It would be easier if we met in person, but the chances of him trusting me are slim to none. But writing a letter also had its drawbacks. Because it is hard to convey emotions in a letter, I have no idea what I am going to do. Tilda with Hedwig and the Dark Lord Tilda. Voldy, Pav, idiots all of them, I thought as I made it back to my office. The lower Death Eaters act as if they have no idea what they are doing. How hard is it to do a simple task, and then report the outcome at a meeting? I sighed as I made it to my desk, and just as I sat down, a snowy owl glided into my room, a letter attached to its leg. The owl landed gracefully and stuck its leg out, and just stared at me. Odd behavior for an owl, but what can I do? I grabbed the letter, and the owl relaxed its leg and continued staring at me. Another sigh escaped my lips as I unrolled the parchment. Lord Voldemort, Tom Riddle, the Dark Lord, he who has too many names. I suppose an introduction is due. Hello, I'm Harry Potter, the boy who refused to die. I am aware how odd it must be for me to be writing you, but I assure you there is a good reason. It has come to my attention in the past few days that my life has been a lie. Everything I have been told up to this point has been utter bullshit. I am sure you can imagine the shocking realization that Dumbledore the old goat is an evil manipulative bastard. I suppose I shouldn't be too shocked. No one can be as influential and exalted as the great Albus Dumbledore without some tricks up their sleeves. However, at the moment that is not my concern. I simply wish to set up a meeting so I can explain what has happened since my 15th birthday. However, if all of this seems too good to be true, or far-fetched, just shoo Hedwig away. I pled to you, do not harm her. I consider her family, and I would hate to have to hurt you over an owl. But again, that is not the point. Have a nice day. Respond if you wish or don't. It would be nice if you did, but I am sure I can manage without you. Sincerely, the Potter brat. The owl on my desk seemed to be waiting for my decision. I must DMIT, this is a very interesting situation. Potter seems to think he could hurt me. Interesting boy indeed. What's the harm in writing the brat back? It seems he found out the truth. I pulled out a strip of parchment and wrote back an answer. The owl. Hedwig watched me intently as I finished up the letter, and cast a few charms to prevent tracking, just in case. Hedwig thrust her leg out and I gently tied the letter to her leg, and watched as she flew out the window, and to wherever Potter was hiding. This will turn out to be an interesting turn of events. Now to wait. Harry, Tilda. I had decided that writing a letter to Draco was the best idea. I just needed to wait for Hedwig to come back before I started on that. In the meantime, I decided to find out what had to happen for Loki to fully become my familiar. It is rather simple on your part, albeit very painful, he remarked after I asked what had to happen. Loki, that doesn't tell me anything. He seemed to laugh before continuing his explanation. Well, you see, I have to bite you, and inject some venom into your bloodstream, for me to bond as your familiar, he said nonchalantly. I laughed, not because I didn't believe him, but because he was right. Simple but painful. What are the side effects? Well, you will more than likely pass out. How long depends on the size of your magical core. You will also have a mark of some sort to represent your familiar wherever I bite you. Seems reasonable, I suppose, I said as I sat on my bed. Go ahead. Loki seemed to contemplate before slithering up to my shoulders and sinking his teeth into the spot above my collarbone close to my neck. Suddenly white-hot pain ran through my body. It felt like lava was running through my veins instead of blood. It took every fiber in my body not to scream bloody murder. I saw black dots, and then nothing as I fell unconscious. At least Loki warned me that I would pass out, I guess. 2.5 hours later. I slowly opened my eyes to see Loki not even 3 inches from my face. I was surprised when I didn't feel any of the white-hot pain that coursed through my veins before I passed out. You're awake. Yes, Loki, I am. How long was I out? About 2.5 hours. I'm surprised, I assumed it would be longer. You're stronger than I thought. Thanks, I suppose. Well, let me up so I can see this mark. He moved back to curl on my shoulders so I could get up. I walked to the bathroom, and peered in the mirror, and smiled wickedly. Oh, this is fantastic, I said with the same smile. Good, I thought you would be upset. Far from it, Loki, far from it. Now to see if Hedwig was back. Comment, share, vote. See you later, my dudes. Meeting. Harry's hair only read . Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Harry, I was skimming through a parcel magic book, when Hedwig flew through my window. She landed in front of me and held out her leg. I grabbed the parchment and took a deep breath. Harry Potter, the boy who forgot to die. You were quite right on your assumption that this seems rather strange. It's not every day that you hear from the boy who is supposed to be your greatest enemy. If your letter holds a grain of truth, it seems that you have finally figured out the truth of the world. You have learned that good and bad depend on who is telling the story. I would very much like to know what you have actually learned. If it suits you, we could meet at Riddle Manor at 2 o'clock on the dot today. If not, simply let me know that you think you could hurt me, if I hurt your owl. Tom Riddle. I laughed as I read the last line. If only he knew what I was capable of when I got angry. I grabbed a scrap of paper off the desk and wrote "See you at 2" on it. I walked over to Hedwig, and tied the note to her leg. You don't have to wait for a response, just drop it off, and come back. Thank you, girl, I said quietly. She nodded with a hoot, and then flew back out the window. I sighed, and then cast Tempest and saw it was 12:45. I had enough time to shower and eat a quick lunch. I put Loki into his terrarium on his heated rock, and spelled some live mice in his well. I then grabbed clothes, and went to shower. After the shower, I got dressed into a black shirt that ironically said I speak Parseltongue, emerald jeans, and black Vans. I grabbed Sirius jacket, and put half my hair into a bun. I walked to the kitchen and decided grilled cheese would be one of the fastest things to make. I quickly cooked, and ate my lunch. As I finished, Hedwig flew back though the window. I checked the time again, and noticed it was 1:45. She must have gone hunting after she dropped off the note. I patted her on the head, and strapped my wand holster to my arm, and stowed my wand in it. I then walked back to my room, grabbed Loki, and let him rest on my shoulders, and then put on Ciri's jacket. I'm going to warn you now, Loki, you are going to hate flowing. Is it worse than apparating? For some people, animals, yes. Lovely, he said sarcastically. The clock on the wall read 1:57, so I walked to the fireplace, and grabbed some flow powder. You're gonna want to hold on tight, Loki, I said before throwing the flow powder. Riddle Manor, I yelled as green took over my vision. I walked into the foyer of Riddle Manor at exactly 2 o'clock, when suddenly 15 wands were pointed in my direction. I growled lowly and quickly drew my wand. As Loki let out a menacing hiss, and rose from my shoulders, eyes glowing. The blasting hex was on the tip of my tongue when all of a sudden I heard clapping. I let my eyes drift to the noise and saw Voldemort, no Tom Riddle, sitting at the head of a table clapping. All of you can put your wands away, I invited the boy here. I snapped my eyes back to the 15 Death Eaters. And their wands pointed in my direction. I glared as they hesitantly put away their wands and made their way back to their seats. I slowly stood up from my fighting stance, and holstered my wand. However, I was still tense. Ready just in case this was a trap. Loki quit hissing, and lowered himself back to my shoulders. However, his eyes never quit glowing. Very interesting, Mr. Potter. The last I heard, you weren't very good at dueling. However, it seems that information was incorrect, he said with a smirk. You'd be surprised on how much of your information was wrong. Was that some kind of test? If so, was it for me? Are your followers? I asked with a small smirk on my face. I suppose a bit of both. I wanted to know if you were lying, and I wanted to see how fast my friends would react. I nodded. That was fair. I mean no disrespect, my lord, but why in Merlin's beard is the Potter brat here? Lucius asks with an incredulous look on his face. Well, Lucius, he is here because he finally learned the truth. And crawled out from under Dumbledore's thumb, and wants to explain what he has learned, Tom said calmly. They all looked in my direction, and I just nodded. It seemed to ease the tension in the room, and all the Death Eaters relaxed. However, I stayed tense. Old habits die hard. Have a seat, Harry. I'm interested to know what caused the sudden change. Owen said, gesturing to one of 3 empty seats. I walked casually to the seat furthest from a flabbergasted Snape, and sat down. I relaxed just enough so I didn't seem suspicious. All right, so where do you want me to start? Because there are like 4 beginnings, I said nonchalantly. Just start at the very beginning, Tom said quickly. All right, but you asked for it. For starters, I was raised in my aunt and uncle's house. 2 of the most awful magic-hating muggles to ever walk this earth, in my opinion. Living with them wasn't terrible when I was young, and couldn't really do anything, the occasional smack, or time out. However, that all changed when I turned 7, and could reach all the things in the kitchen. From that day on, I was responsible for all the chores in the house, and all the cooking and cleaning. Oh, and God forbid I messed anything up. Burnt food, beating, not doing a chore, beating, or I would get a beating, and not allowed to have food or water, and would be locked in my cupboard. Then when I turned 10, I could push the lawnmower, and then I was responsible for everything in the house, and the yard work, and garden work. Anything that didn't meet their standards, I was punished for. I have experienced every kind of abuse you could think of. So when people told everyone I was treated like royalty, they really had no idea what kind of environment I was living in. What's funny is that Dumbledore knew, and was paying them to abuse me. His note said he wanted them to beat the magic out of me. Then we move on to school starting. Hagrid came to get me, and wouldn't stop talking about the great Albus Dumbledore, how he was the best wizard. He was leading the light against the dark. He talked about how much Dumbledore cared for me, and the fate of the world. He told me about Hogwarts. About which house was best blah blah blah. I met Draco at Madame Malkin's, and thought he would have been a cool friend. Then I got on the train after I met the Weasleys, and they filled me with more light propaganda. And then Draco was a prat. No offense Mr. Malfoy. So when he was sorted into Slytherin I decided that I did not want to be in that house. So when the sorting H.A. told me I was perfect for Slytherin I pleaded for him to put me in any house but Slytherin, so I was put into Gryffindor. I hate to interrupt, but what? Bellatrix burst out. You were supposed to be in Slytherin. Yeah, I said quickly. Rodolphus grabbed her shoulder, and shushed her. Ignore her, Potter. Continue your story, he said quickly. Yeah sure, so after that you know what happened. Then at the end of last year I overheard Hermione and Ron talking to Dumbledore about being paid to be me friends, and how they wished I would hurry up and die. So this summer, I got a partial inheritance. And learned all this stuff, and now here I am, I finished with a shrug. The room had noticeably dropped in temperature, and my scar was throbbing when the story was over. I immediately tensed back up, ready to fight my way out if I had to. You're mean to tell. Dumbledore knowingly put you in a house of abusive muggles, and was plotting to kill you, Tom hissed with barely contained rage. Yes, I said quietly. Suddenly all the glasses on the table exploded, and my forehead felt like it was being cleaved open by a hot knife. I hissed in pain as I felt a bead of blood drip from my scar. And slammed my hand on the table. Merlin, damn it Tom, calm the hell down, I yelled. In case you've forgotten, when you get angry my scar hurts, and being this close to you makes it feel like someone is cleaving my head open with a scalding knife, I said with a hiss as I wiped the blood off my face. The pain lessened substantially as Tom came to his senses. The glasses fixed themselves, and the Death Eaters looked astonished. My apologies Harry, I forgot that when I get angry you feel pain, Tom said in a calmer tone. It's fine, I just wasn't prepared for that reaction, I said with a sigh. So any questions? I asked quickly. You said you only came into a partial inheritance, what does that mean? Lucius asked. It means that this was supposed to happen when I turned 17 along with my creature inheritance, but it didn't. So basically all that happened was I got emancipated, learned my heritage, and got the properties, titles, and money that are rightfully mine. So when I turn 17 I have a creature inheritance that will happen. I said quickly. Every say which creature you will be, Barty asked. Nope, I said with a smile. It looked like Tom was gonna ask a question when suddenly the door slammed open. Everyone jumped to their feet and drew their wands. I simply cast a notice me not charm on myself so I wouldn't be noticed. Sorry we're late, Dumbles had us held up in a meeting. That's besides the point. Harry is missing, and no one knows where he is, I heard as Sirius and Remus barged into the room. Tom simply smirked. Actually he isn't missing, he's right here. As soon as he finished his sentence, I dropped the charm, and smiled. Merlin's beard, look at you. Finally got rid of that awful glamour I see, Sirius said with a laugh as I got up to give him a hug. Yes. Wait Padfoot, are you saying I was ugly before? I asked with a smirk. Yes I am Harry, he said with a laugh. I playfully pushed him away, and hugged Remus. So how much of the meeting did we miss? Remus asked as we sat back down at the table. Just the bit where Harry explained his childhood, Tom said. Siri and Remy's faces darkened. That's probably for the better. Harry, you can fill us in later about that, Remy said, and I nodded. Okay, so what did the Order of the Flaming Chickens have to say? Tom asked suddenly. Just the usual blabber about defeating you for the greater good. Albus also seemed very worried that you have been decently quiet. Your lack of activity is bothering him. He was also very upset about the fact that Harry went missing, and that his relatives have no idea of when he left. He is bound and determined to find Harry. He is worried that somehow you got a hold of him. He is making finding Harry his top priority. In fact, T is what every member of the Order is to focus on, finding Harry, Sirius explained. So that means Albus thinks Tom has me, but has no proof, right, which means he will never think to look for me at one of the properties that I have inherited because he doesn't know that I came into a partial inheritance, right? I asked. Technically yes, but I would still be careful pup. Remus said quickly, and I nodded. All right, if the dark side, being quiet is bothering Albus, that is exactly what we are going to keep doing for now. Let the fact that the great Albus Dumbledore has lost the world's savior hit the public. That will surely cause chaos, and will paint Albus in a bad light. Then when school starts back up, we decide what to do from there, Tom said with a smirk on his face. Everyone in the room nodded. All right, that does it for the meeting. You all are dismissed. Harry, Sirius, Remus, Snape, stay back, we have more to discuss. Tom said with a smirk. Everyone nodded, and started disapparating, or flowing home. So Moony, Padfoot, anything new to tell me about? I asked nonchalantly. They looked at each other, and then Padfoot smirked. Well pup, Remy and I are dating, Padfoot said proudly. That's not new, I already knew that, I said with laugh. How? Moony asked shocked. It's painfully obvious guys, come when a bloody blind man could have figured it out, I explained. Oh, I had no idea, Moony said quietly. I just laughed. Potter, could I speak to you for a minute? I snapped my head to the left, and there stood Snape looking uncomfortable. I tensed up. This was gonna suck. Comment, share, vote. See you later my dudes. Apologies. Thoughts. Parseltongue. Spells. Harry, Pav. I stood tensed as Severus made his way to me. He was unpredictable. And the last time I checked he was in Dumbledore's pocket, which means he could be a liability. I just put on a blank face, so he couldn't track my train of thought through my facial expressions. Ho Harry, I wanted to apologize. I was foolish, and brainwashed by the old goat. He convinced me that you were raised like a prince, and that you were a carbon copy of your father. I am aware that I was very childish, and turned a blind eye. When you demonstrated continuously that you were nothing like your father, I was too blinded by Dumbledore, so from the bottom of my heart, I apologize. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I needed to explain myself, he said all at once. You're right Severus, you were childish, and you don't deserve my forgiveness. I watched as he visibly deflated. However, I forgive you. 1. Because Dumbledore is a conniving, power-hungry bastard. 2. My mother named you as one of my godfathers, and that means you are family, and I will always take care of family. However, you better hope it doesn't come to light that you are still in Dumbledore's pocket, because I have been betrayed enough, I said with a small grin on my face. He did something I never thought I would see, he smiled. And in my surprise I almost forgot to return it. But I caught myself and gave him a small smile back. Let's go see what the others are up to, I said as we walked over to the table where the others were conversing. Seven and I sat down, and the others looked in our direction. Did you get everything sorted pup? Moony asked immediately. He looked a little hesitant, and I just smiled. Yep, everything is all good Moony, he smiled back before nodding. Okay, so the reason I held you all back is because we need to discuss what we are going to do now that Harry knows the truth. Tom said with a grim look on his face. Actually about that, I have an idea. I figured that I would just go back to Hogwarts and act like nothing is wrong. Then I planned to get resorted into my true house, and make a handful of trustworthy friends, and then slowly start tearing Dumbledore down from inside the school, I said simply. Everyone looked shocked for a moment, and then an evil smirk slid onto Tom's face. That is a genius plan Harry, you really do belong in Slytherin, he said. Everyone else nodded. All right, who do you plan on befriending? Siri asked with a raised eyebrow. Well, I already have a few friends that I know will stick by my side through thick and thin. The Weasley twins, Luna Lovegood, and Draco Malfoy, making a couple more wouldn't be that hard. I said with a smile. So are those people just allies, or are they actually your friends? Tom asked. Oh, they are my closest friends, I would lay down my life for them, I said fiercely. I don't make friends just to use them as pawns. That is truly unforgivable in my eyes. Betraying people who put their utmost trust in you is disgusting. I would never do that to a person, I say with anger lacing my word. A look of shock crosses Tom's face. That's right pup. Someone who would do that to people they call friends is a disgusting human being, Moony said with a proud look on his face. I smiled at him. He knew how much friends meant to me. All right then, how do you plan to start destroying Dumbledore then Harry? Sev asked suddenly. Well, telling you would take the fun out of it, but I will say I know quite a few pretty terrible things about the esteemed headmaster that he would rather not be brought to light. I will start there, I said with a smile. This seemed to satisfy him, as he simply nodded. Oh, before anyone says anything else, I have a couple questions for you, Tom. He nodded and I took that as my cue to ask away. Okay, so I understand that Dumbles is responsible for my parents dying. But that doesn't explain how you got wrapped up in this, or my scar. So how the hell did you get mixed up in this? I asked. Pain washed over his face before he sighed. Everyone in the room looked tense. It is true that Dumbles was the mastermind behind your parents' death, but I am the one who killed them. Before you fly into a rage, it wasn't because I wanted to, but because he made me. He had me under the imperious curse, and forced me to do it. Your parents were actually on my side, and they figured something like that would happen. The rat was never one of my lackeys. He was loyal to Dumbledore to a fault. And together they forced me to kill them. I am truly sorry, Harry. I never meant for them to be harmed, or for you to be dragged into this. Dumbles needed a foe, and a savior, and he was determined to have them. He finished there for a second as I absorbed all the information. I was shaking from trying to control my magic that was threatening to lash out and tear apart the room. You mean to tell me that this asshole not only took away my parents, he stooped low enough to completely ruin someone else? For his own gain, I finished with a yell. Tom nodded sadly. A low continuous growl started in my chest. So in conclusion, he fucked up your life just to make you seem like a mad bastard intent on destroying the world simply to have a savior. Hat would die for his cause so he could seem like the savior of the wizarding world so he could ultimately take control of it. Oh, he is so dead, I said in a calm tone. Everyone nodded again, and I just smiled. Thanks for filling me in on everything that has happened. You guys are welcome at Godric's Hallow whenever you please, just let me know beforehand. If you will excuse me, I have letters to write. And I need to get all of my stuff ready for school, I said quietly. I then hugged Moony and Siri and then apparated back home. When I got home, I apologized to Loki and set him in his tank. I then walked into the forest in the backyard. When I got into the thicker part of the forest, I quickly drew my wand before letting every spell, light or dark, that I could think of off. When I finished, the forest looked like a battlefield. I was breathing hard and exhausted. I muttered a couple reparos in Parseltongue before walking back into the house, and straight into the study and penned a letter to Draco. I sent it off with Hedwig before summoning a few books from my room to read while I waited for her to return. Narrator's POV. The four left at the table were in shock as they watched Harry apparate away. Which shouldn't be possible with the wards in place on the manor. This is not good, Severus said quietly. The others agreed. Dumbles had finally met his match, and he had no idea what was coming for him. Comment, vote, share. See you later, my dudes. Planning, Parseltongue, thoughts, spells. Narrator POV. Draco Malfoy was sitting in the library of his manor when a very familiar owl flew through the door and perched on the arm of the chair he was sitting in. Hedwig stretched her foot out in his direction before hooting softly. He sighed and took the pie of parchment of her leg, and she flew to perch on a chair further from him. It seemed she was told to wait for a response. He marked his page and closed the book he was reading and unrolled the parchment. Draco Malfoy, I'm going to start this off with an apology. I am sorry for how I treated you during school. I was an ignorant, brainwashed child. I only knew what Dumbledore wanted me to know. I had only been exposed to the people he wanted me to know and befriend. I was naive and trusted easily, and for that I am sorry. I learned the truth recently, and learned that everything that I had learned had been complete and utter bullshit. I now know that Dumbles is the true evil of this world, and I am determined to right the wrongs he has committed. In short, I should have taken your offer of friendship in first year. I simply wanted to request a meeting to explain what I have figured out, and what I plan to do. If you don't believe me, that's fine, I understand completely. Just shoo Hedwig away. However, if you believe even a sliver of what's in this letter, let me know when the best time and place to meet is. Sincerely, Scarhead. Draco sat stunned for a few moments before a small laugh escaped him. So his father was telling the truth. Potter really had come to his senses. He got up and walked to a desk close to his chair to write out a response to Potter. He checked the time, and decided it would be best to meet him tomorrow considering it was getting later. He finished the letter, and then walked over to Hedwig. She stuck out her leg and he tied the parchment to her. She gave him another hoot before flying off. He watched her leave before walking back to his chair, sitting down and continuing where he left on in his book. Took him long enough, was what he thought as he continued reading. Harry Potter. It was about 6:30 when Hedwig flew back through my window. I had managed to get caught up to about 5th year in studies in that time. She landed on the perch on my desk and held out her leg. I grabbed the parchment and unrolled it as she tucked her head in her wing. She must be tired, poor girl. Harry Potter. I suppose I should follow suit and apologize for all of the things that I have done to you, and I am truly sorry. I had no idea about what really happened until recently when my father decided to tell me the truth. So yes, I do believe you. And I would very much like to meet and discuss what you have learned in its entirety. If it suits you, you can flow to the manor tomorrow around 12 so we can talk. Sincerely, Malfoy. I was surprised he actually agreed to meet me. But the fact that Lucius told him the truth probably helps. I burned the parchment before making dinner, and then going to bed. Tomorrow would surely be interesting. Tilde 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 time skip tilde 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 tilde. Narrator Pav. Soft hooting was all Harry heard as he woke up the next day. He sat up and saw Hedwig on his bedpost, and pet her as he got up to let her out to hunt. He checked his watch to see that it was only 9 o'clock. He had plenty of time to get everything that he needed arranged. He got out of bed and went to the kitchen to start on breakfast. He made a few pancakes, and just as he was sitting down, Hedwig flew in with the Daily Prophet. He grabbed it out of the air as she swooped through the window and dropped it. On the front page was his glamored face with a headline that read, "Breaking news. The boy who lived Harry Potter. Missing. This is not a drill, my lovely readers. It has come to this journalist's attention that the light's savior has gone missing. It has been revealed that Potter had been missing for at least a week before the great Albus Dumbledore caught wind of the boy's disappearance. In an interview, Albus stated, 'This is no reason for anyone to panic. I am sure Harry has a very good reason for his sudden disappearance. It is my top priority to find out where he has gone, and why he felt the need to leave without informing anyone. I can assure you this situation will be resolved very quickly, and I state again that there is absolutely no reason to worry, thank you.' While interviewing Albus, I noticed that he seemed the littlest bit on edge. And that to me screams that he isn't telling the whole truth. So my dear readers, I do in fact think that we need to worry. How on earth does one such as the great Albus Dumbledore lose track of someone so important? If he is in fact lying about this, what else could he be lying about? Many questions have been raised, and I can promise you, dear readers, that this journalist will get to the bottom of them. Rita Skeeter. Harry sat dumbfounded for a moment. It seemed he had an avenue to spread some of the information he had about Dumbledore. This would definitely prove to be useful. He sighed and got up to wash the dishes. As soon as he finished that, he went to shower. It was almost 11, and he would not be late for his meeting with Draco. Harry Potter. After I got out of the shower, I immediately went to my wardrobe to decide what to wear. I knew for a fact jeans and a t-shirt wouldn't work. So I grabbed a forest green dress shirt and black dress pants, got dressed, and put on a black pair of dress shoes as well. I rolled my sleeves to just below my elbows, and put my hair into a slightly messy bun before grabbing Siri's leather jacket and putting it on as well. I slid my wand into the pocket on the inside, and waked to Loki's tank. "Would you like to come with me to meet Draco?" "Yes, master. Are we flowing again?" "Yes, we are." "Great," he replied sarcastically. I laughed and checked my watch. 11:55. I extended my arm into Loki's tank and waited for him to get settled across my shoulders before walking to the fireplace. I grabbed a handful of flow powder and threw it into Thier before once again my vision was overtaken by green flames. Comment, vote, share. See you later, my dudes. Friends. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Third person POV. Draw. Malfoy was lounging in the largest sitting room in Malfoy Manor waiting for Harry Potter to flow in. He was a little nervous, not that he would admit it, that Harry would still have a grudge against him even though he said he forgave him. In the next second the flow roared to life. Out stepped who Draco assumed had to be Harry, but he looked nothing like he did the last time Draco saw him. Inst. EAD of a meek boy with messy hair and ratty clothes, a regal-looking teen stepped out of the fireplace. Gone was the messy black hair and ratty clothes. In their place was long auburn hair in a messy bun, and a nice dress shirt and pants. Draco was stunned momentarily before he got up to greet his new friend. "Good afternoon, Potter," he said with a polite smile. "Hello, Malfoy. Please just call me Harry," the redhead said with a smirk. "All right, Harry. Then you can call me Draco," the blonde said with a smirk of his own. Harry nodded with a smile. Draco led Harry to a small table with 2 plush armchairs on either side of it. He gestured for Harry to sit before taking his own seat. "Would you like some tea, Harry?" he asked. "That would be lovely. Yes, please," Harry responded. Draco called on a house elf and she quickly brought out tea and biscuits. Harry took a sip of his tea and then looked up at Draco. "What do you want to know?" he questioned with a calm face. "Everything that you are willing to tell me," Draco replied. Harry sighed and put down his cup. "All right, but you are not going to like this," he said with a sullen smile. Time skip, Draco paused. "I sat quietly for a moment after Harry told me about his relatives. I was trying desperately not to go into a fit of rage, and it wasn't working. These muggles did despicable things to him, and he didn't deserve it in the slightest. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got." Harry looked up from his teacup and sighed. "Draco, there is no need for you to be angry. The Dursleys will be dealt with soon enough. Please calm down," he said calmly. "How in the hell are you so calm about this situation? They did horrible things to you," I ended with a shout. His face hardened, and his eyes darkened. "I am very much aware of what they did to me. But don't worry, they will get what's coming to them soon, and that is something I am looking forward to," he said with a dark smirk on his lips. I sighed and took a deep breath to calm myself down. "Okay, continue. What are your plans for Hogwarts?" I asked after a pause. "Oh, that is rather simple. First I am going to get resorted, then I am going to make some lifelong friends. After that I'm going to devise a plan to deal with our esteemed headmaster. Then who knows, help reform the wizarding world maybe," he said flippantly. I stared at him for a second and then let out a sigh. "You want to take over the world, really, Harry?" I said, exasperated. "No, that is all on Voldy. I just want to help here and there. This world is corrupt and I want to be a part of the change," he said calmly. I smirked before letting out a laugh. "Well, Harry, if anyone can do it, you can. I believe that you can count me as one of your lifelong friends," I said with a smile. He nodded, stood up and held out his hand. "Hello. My name is Harry Potter. Would you like to be friends?" he said with a laugh in his voice. I smiled and took his hand. "Yes, I would," I said as we shook hands. "So how exactly do you plan to get resorted?" I asked as we sat back down. I thought the Hat's decisions were always final. Well, they usually are, when his placements are correct. He told me in first year that I was made for Slytherin, but I pleaded for him to put me anywhere else. So he did begrudgingly. The fact that I am heir to half of Hogwarts also helps. The castle is sentient, and knows what her heirs desire. So she will know, and will inform the Hat that I finally want to be placed in my true house. He will make an announcement and I will be resorted, simple as that, he said with a nonchalant shrug. I sat for a second as I processed what he said to me. "Okay, you're telling me that not only were you supposed to be in Slytherin, but you own half of Hogwarts?" I asked incredulously. "Yup," he said with a grin. "Bloody hell, Harry, you really are something, aren't you? Anything else I need to know?" I said as I slouched in the chair. He laughed, and then a snake popped its head out of his shirt. And I jumped. "Actually, yes, this is my familiar Loki," he said as the snake slithered onto the floor and over to me. The snake stopped in front of my chair and raised its head. I glanced to Harry, who only nodded before hesitantly stroking Loki's snout. He licked my hand before going back over to Harry and hissing at him. Harry laughed and hissed back at the snake, and I jumped again. Memories of second year coming back to me. How could I forget that Harry spoke Parseltongue? "He says you are peculiar, but he likes you," Harry said with a smirk in his voice. I laughed. "Well, I guess I will count that as a good thing," I replied. He nodded and checked his watch. "This has been lovely, Draco, but I must get going. I still have a couple things to finalize before school starts." "It was great to talk to you," he said as he got up. "Likewise, Harry. I'm glad that we could become friends. I'll me if you need anything. Have a nice day, I'll see you at school, I said as he walked to the fireplace. I will, see you later Draco, and with that the flow roared to life and he disappeared in green flames. I walked back to my seat, and took a sip of my tea. Merlin helped the men and women who get in his way, I thought as I finished my tea, and had an elf take the dishes back to the kitchen. A.N. Well, here it is, the long-awaited rewrite. Sorry it took so long, my dudes. I have been very busy, but hey, aren't we all? As always, vote, comment, share. See you later, my dudes. School. A.N. Please read the A.N. at the bottom, it has the winner of the poll. And a poll for the partner S of another important character. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Time skip. Fred. George. It was September 1st, and Harry was more than ready to get on the Hogwarts Express and get back to Hogwarts. He had done more than enough research, and read all of his school books, so he was 100% prepared for all of his classes. It was currently 10:30, and Harry had just apparated to King's Cross Station. Harry, Pav. I had just gotten to King's Cross when I spotted the Weasley family and Hermione. I knew I could get past everyone but the twins, so I just hope they don't ask until we got on the train. I walked past them, and immediately the twins locked eyes with me. I gave them a small nod, and they smiled. I walked through the barrier and got on the train. I made sure to find an empty compartment towards the back. I pulled out my shrunken trunk from my pocket, put it on the rack above my head and resized it. I had just taken my seat when a knock sounded on the compartment door. I looked up to see Draco, and unlocked the door with a wave of my hand. When he was in, and seated, I closed and locked the door again. With your hair I almost didn't recognize you, he said with a smirk. I laughed before responding. Yeah, it's not like I have visited you since it changed or anything, I said with a straight face. He smiled before bursting into laughter. I chuckled along with him. So how was the remainder of your summer, Draco? I asked after we had calmed down. Boring as usual. Potions, flying, Quidditch and things like that, he said with a shrug. I just smiled. Before I forget, Fred and George will probably be here shortly to ask about a million questions, I said with a sigh. I suppose you're going to tell the whole story, he inquired with a raised eyebrow. I'll have to. They always know when I lie to them. That sentence had barely left my mouth when the compartment was knocked on again. I snapped my head up to say twins smiling at the door. Speak of the devil, I told Draco with a smile as I opened the door and then closed when they got in the compartment. Do you want the short version or the long version? I asked Ed after they had taken their seats on either side of me. Long, they said in sync. I sighed again before preparing myself to tell my story again. Okay then. First of all, Dumbles is the bad guy. He was the one who killed my parents and framed Voldy Shorts. He also has been paying Ron and Hermione to be my friends, Molly to keep an eye on me, and dose me with potions, and wrote up a marriage contract between Ginny and I. When I finished my sentence I heard a low growl, and was surprised to find that it was coming from the twins. However, I ignored it for now, and continued on with my story. After killing my parents, Dumbles proceeded to place me in the care of my Muggle aunt and uncle. Everything was fine, just the occasional starvation, until I turned 7. From then on I was to cook every meal, and chores were added on. By the time I was 9, until recently I was forced to do all the chores in the house. But there was a catch: if I didn't do correctly, or messed up in the slightest, I was beaten within an inch of my life. At first anyway, I finished with a mumble. The twins were livid, and Draco had a disgusted look on his face, having already heard the story. It looked as if they didn't catch the last sentence, and I breathed out a sigh of relief. Why, was the simple word Fred said that had me laughing darkly. The answer to that is simple. Dumbles wants to rule the wizarding world. To do that he needed to create another Dark Lord, and kill them. This would bring him back into the spotlight, and the world would listen to him. The great Albus Dumbledore, destroyer of evil. Everyone would revere him, and he could easily take over. However, he made a mistake. He got too comfortable, and now I know the truth, and he will pay, I said with a dark look on my face. The twins were silent for a moment before twin mischievous spread across their faces. We are so in. We want to help you. They finished together. I just smiled and laughed. I was hoping you would say that, I said with a smirk. You know, have 3 people willing to help you take down Dumbles. I would say you are doing well, Har, Draco said with a smirk. 3 down, 7-ish to go, Dre, I said with a smile. Draco and the twins laughed. We continued to laugh and talk throughout the ride to Hogwarts, and when we were halfway there I noticed the twins were sitting close enough to me that they were both touching me. I didn't mind it in the slightest. I added this and the Growlung to a list in my head. I don't need to get my hopes up. I was brought out of my musings by Loki hissing at me. Master, we are almost at Hogwarts. You and your friends should change into your robes. Aw, thank for reminding me, Loki. What would I do without you? I replied with a smile. I noticed the twins had tensed for a moment but quickly relaxed. Another mental note. Loki has just reminded me that we need to change into our robes, I said to Draco and the twins. They simply nodded. Before we knew it, we were at Hogwarts. As George, Fred, Draco, and I made our way to a carriage, I noticed my ex-friends, and Ginny looking for whom I supposed was me. I smirked before nudging Draco and pointing to them. He looked over and sneered. While the twins noticed and glared at them. The annoying trio, as Draco calls them, waltzed up to the twins, while glaring at Draco. First of all, have you seen Harry? Hermione asks. Secondly, why are you hanging out with Malfoy? Continues Ron. Thirdly, who is this? Ginny asks with what I assumed was supposed to be a flirty voice. No, because we can. None of your business. The twins answered before we all got into the carriage, and it pulled away. I was laughing at the trio's faces, as was Draco, as soon as the door shut. I made sure to cast a glamour in myself so I would look like I used to. The twins just smiled as the carriage brought us to Hogwarts. As we arrived, one thought rang through my head. This is going to be great. What is up, my dudes? I finally got internet back, and I have the long-awaited update. As you can see, Fred x Harry x George is the winner. I want to add another pairing, so I need suggestions for who will be with Draco. People who come to mind are Luna, Theo, Blaze, Pansy. You do not have to pick only from this list. Give me your suggestions, I would love to hear them. So as always, comment, vote, share. See you later, my dudes. Surprise, surprise. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Fred, George, both twins. We had finally arrived at the castle, and I couldn't keep the smirk off my face as we entered the Great Hall. We parted ways, and sat at our house tables. The twins shot me questioning looks, which only caused my smirk to become more sinister. What did you do? They questioned. Oh, trust me, you'll see. I replied with a wink. Minerva ushered the first years into the building, and escorted them to the sorting hat. The hat interrupted her as she opened her mouth to give the usual speech. I hate to interrupt Professor McGonagall, but I must correct the grievous mistake I made when sorting a student 3 years ago, the hat said loud and proud. The Great Hall burst into whispers. I changed my body language to look like the scared, abused Gryffindor I used to be when I noticed Dumbledore glancing at me. I stared back at him with a very confused face, and he quit staring at me. McGonagall gave the hat a long hard look before nodding her head. The hat straightened up before bellowing out a name. Harry Potter, the hat yelled out. I jumped and gave Dumbledore a terrified look as I walked timidly to the stool. McGonagall looked distraught as I sat down and she placed the hat on my head for the second time. I made sure to shrink in fear as the hat blocked my vision. Ah, Mr. Potter, it has been a while. It seems you are finally ready to be in your destined house. Yes, it has, Alistair, and yes, I am definitely ready to be sorted correctly. Well, looks like it better be. Slytherin. The whole hall seemed to freeze and suddenly there was polite applause from Snape, and the Slytherins followed suit. A smug look found its way onto my face as I walked timidly to the Slytherin table. McGonagall continued the sorting as scheduled, and I felt Dumblebee trying to burn holes into the back of my head. Slight time skip. The old coot had just finished his huge speech, and the feast was just beginning. So far, most of the Slytherins were glaring at me, but I paid no attention to it. Everyone's food was appearing on their plate, and that's when the tables broke into conversation. Draco had started telling me more about his adventures during the summer when Pansy Parkinson butted in. How in Merlin's name did you get into Slytherin? Pansy sneered. I rolled my eyes. before turning to her with a blank look on my face. If you must know Parkinson, I was always supposed to be here, but I was a misguided 11-year-old, I replied, putting slight venom into her name. Yeah right Potter, you don't have the qualities to be a Slytherin. I mean you mom was a filthy mudblood, she said in a smug tone. The whole table quieted slightly and looked at us. Those sitting close to Pansy moved away slightly. Draco tried to tell her to take it back, but it was already too late. I felt Loki shift under my shirt as every glass on the table shattered as my magic exploded out of me. You have crossed the line, Parkinson. I don't know you, nor do I know what you have been through. However, I can tell you that you are a stuck little girl who likes to pick on people to make yourself feel better. You would rather lash out at people than get to know them because you were so caught up in your ideals that you don't know up from down. I never got to meet my mother, but I can promise you she had more magical capability than you in her pinky finger. She was kind and never jumped to a conclusion without thinking things through first. She was SMVERB, in fact she was hailed the smartest witch of her time. If you ever, and I do mean ever, use those words to refer to my mother again, I will make your life a living hell. You will live in constant fear of what will happen next, and you will regret the day you met me. If you persist, I have a lovely snake who would be more than happy for a meal the size of you. Do I make myself clear? I asked in a quiet menacing hiss. She looked as if she had seen a ghost, and tears were running down her face, but she nodded in agreement. Good, please do enjoy the rest of your meal, Parkinson, I said in a slightly calmer voice as I reined in my magic. The entire table was silent as they processed what happened. I smirked and prodded Loki through our mind link. He popped his head out of my robes, and I conjured a live mouse for him to eat. The Slytherins had a mix of fear and astonishment in their eyes, and Parkinson watched Loki eat the mouse with a terrified expression on her face. She looked like she was gonna puke. Draco clear. Ed his throat and quiet conversation started back up along the table. Loki retreated back to my robes, and with an unnoticeable wave of my hand the glasses on the table were fixed. As you were saying, gee, before we were so rudely interrupted, Dre, I said with a sly smirk. He let out a small chuckle before telling me about the new Quidditch moves he had learned over the summer. Narrator Pav. The Slytherins were shocked at the sheer anger that radiated off Harry, and how he had handled Pansy insulting his mother. They immediately knew he was definitely one of them. They knew that he was a force to be reckoned with, and were glad they would not have to fight against him. Over at the professor's table, all but two were in a state of complete shock. Severus Snape, who was amused and pleased with the new addition to his house, and Albus Dumbledore, who was absolutely pissed. His savior had been forced into the snake den, and could be corrupted. He needed to stop that as quickly as possible, but how? What is up, my dudes? Here is another update for you guys. This one is a little late because high school sucks, and I am taking early college classes, so yay tilde. But anyways, no more excuses. So far in the poll, Blaze is winning. I'll give you guys another week to vote before the winner is decided. As always, comment, vote, share. I will see you later, my dudes. True House. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Fred. George. Both twins. The feast had just ended and I was heading to the Slytherin common room when I was cornered by the twins. They did not look very happy. You never said that you were getting resorted. I wanted it to be a surprise for everyone, I said quickly. How are we going to survive when we have to deal with the annoying trio without you every day? They finished together. I laughed slightly. Oh, I don't know. Maybe prank them mercilessly, I said with an innocent face. Cheshire grins spread across their faces as they looked at each other and nodded. The next thing I knew, the twins kissed both my cheeks before running off. Thanks, Harry, I heard them yell as they disappeared from my view. I stood there shocked as a blush creeped its way up my face. I finally snapped out of it, and made my way to the common room. Open, I murmured to the portrait quietly since I didn't know the password. It opened and I made it in just as the prefect finished giving her speech. No one noticed me except for Draco as I quietly stood next to him. He gave me a questioning look and I just shook my head. He shrugged before turning back around as Professor Snape entered dramatically. I tuned out most of his speech, until he said something about rooms. First year's 4 to a room, pick any room that doesn't have a plaque with names on it. Girls the door on the right and up a few stairs. Boys the door on the left up a few stairs. You may go to your rooms now. The first years were gone, and he turned to look at me. Potter, you will be with Draco, Blaise, and Theodore. Welcome to Slytherin, he said before turning and leaving. Follow us, Harry, we'll show you the room, Draco said as he, Blaise, and Theodore got up. I just nodded and followed them up the stairs. The Slytherin rooms were nothing like the ones in Gryffindor. It was larger and there were 4 canopy beds draped with green and silver curtains spread evenly across the room. At the end of each bed were our trunks. There is a fireplace, and 4 chairs in front of it. Finally there were bookshelves at each corner of the room. I found the bed with my trunk at the end of it, and sat down at the end of the bed. The others guys did the same. Before I could greet them, Draco was already talking. Okay, you were late getting to the common room, and when you came in you were blushing, so spill. Draco said in one breath. I sighed at his antics before carefully choosing my answer. Well, a pair of angry red heads cornered me, so that's why I'm late, and I wasn't blushing, I ran so no one noticed I was late. I said with a shrug. Draco gave me a suspicious look as I pulled a few books out of my trunk. I don't believe you, but anyways, how did you get in the common room without the password? Blaise and Theo perked up at this question and gave me curious looks. Parseltongue, I said simply. You seem to forget I'm a Parselmouth quite a lot, I said with a teasing smirk. Oh, shove off, Potter, he said with a chuckle. Theodore and Blaise looked confused for a moment, before looks of realization crossed their faces. I honestly forgot you could do that, Blaise said quietly. Most people do, I replied as I set my book down. I do believe introductions are due considering you only know me as the golden boy of Gryffindor, I said with a smirk. After tea. He way you handled Parkinson at dinner, I think we get you aren't the golden boy anymore, Theodore said with a laugh. Ah, yes, that was a lovely first impression, Blaise agreed. I nodded with a smile. I guess more people saw that than I thought. If you don't mind me asking why the sudden change of heart, Theo asked in a plain tone. I gave him a dark smile before responding. I learned a lot about the people I thought I could trust, I replied stoically. I received a questioning look before Blaise gestured for me to continue. Okay, I'll tell you the short version and give you the long version later, deal? Both Blaise and Theo nodded. Okay, well, first of all, until my recent birthday I have been forced to live with very abusive muggles all my life. Endless chores, abuse, other things. I got an early partial inheritance. And learned that my ex-friends and their families were stealing from me. Dumblefuck was stealing from me, and had multiple blocks and potions put on me for 15 years. I realized I was a fool. And now here I am on the right side, and in my true house, I said as quickly as I could while making sure they could understand me. When I looked up, Blaise and Theo were furious. I was going to say something but Blaise beat me to it. How in the hell did they get away with that? Why would they do that? He murmured after his initial outburst. Better question or why? Oh, you getting revenge, and if so we wanna help. We should be friends, Theo said. Blaise nodded. Of course, I am in need of more friends, I said with a chuckle, and if Draco trusts you, I do, I finished. Theo, Blaise. And Draco smiled at me. Alright, well, welcome to the friend group, I'll introduce you to my twins later. I am going to bed, they nodded, and I pulled the curtains of my bed shut. I immediately put up a silencing around my bed, just in case I wake up screaming. Loki coiled on top of my chest, and I got comfortable. Since when did they become my twins? I thought as I fell asleep. What up, guys? Got another update for you. Also, the poll for Draco's relationship is closed, and the winner is Blaise. He had the most votes by far, and that's what decided it. Point out any grammar and spelling mistakes, and mistakes in general. As always, vote, comment, share. See you later, my dudes. Confront. Thoughts. Spells. Fred. George. Both twins. Disclaimer. The beginning of this chapter contains violence, gore, and scenes of intense abuse. Dream. 14-year-old Harry was sitting in his cupboard, when all of a sudden Uncle Vernon burst in. He was angrier than Harry had ever seen, and obviously drunk. Harry immediately tried to make himself as small as possible, however this seemed to only enrage Vernon further. Before Harry could even blink, he was met with a punch to the jaw. "Do you think you can get away with your freakishness when I'm not here?" he questioned. Harry had no idea what he was talking about, so he remained silent. "This was a very bad idea. Too good for words, freak. I'll beat this insubordination out of you." Hands against the wall, Harry complied, knowing that if he didn't the beating would be worse. As soon as he had his back turned, he felt the metal part of Vernon's belt collide with his back. He dared not to make a sound. He learned quickly that screaming only made things worse. What felt like hours later, Vernon came up with another idea. He left, and Harry thought he was safe. However, minutes later Vernon came back, wielding a kitchen knife. "Now everyone will know just how freakish you are," Vernon pushed hard. "Why?" against the wall and began the process of carving words into Harry's back. This time he couldn't hold back the gut-wrenching scream that tore from his throat. End dream. Unknown to the rest of the boys in his room, Harry woke up with a blood-curdling scream. He quickly calmed down as he realized where he was. "Master, are you okay?" Loki yelled in a worried tone. "Huh, oh yes, I am fine, just a very realistic memory." "Nothing to worry about, Loki," I replied in an unconvincing tone. I sighed as I mumbled Tempest and realized it was only 5 a.m. I shrugged as I crawled to the foot of my bed, and grabbed an advanced potions book from my trunk. Might as well read until everyone else woke up. Slight time skip. It was 6:45 when I heard Draco groan as he woke up. Theo and Blaze surprisingly were up a few minutes later. I closed the book and got up to put it in my trunk. "Morning, guys," I said in a bored voice as I grabbed my clothes for the day. They just groaned a reply. I went to the bathroom and quickly changed into my uniform and my school robes. When I came back, Draco was already dressed, and Blaze and Theo were in the process of shrugging on their robes. "I'm heading to breakfast," I said as I grabbed the book off my bed and headed for the door. I heard 3 okays as I left. I walked out of the common room and started my walk to the Great Hall. I read my book as I walked, when suddenly it was yanked out of my grip. I stopped dead in my tracks, and looked up to see the annoying trio. A growl escaped from my throat as I glared at them. "What in Merlin's name do you want?" I growled out. They exchanged looks before Hermione decided to speak. "Harry, how could you betray us and be sorted into Slytherin?" Hermione started in anger. "Yeah mate, Mione's right, we're your friends. How could you turn your back on Gryffindor like that?" continued Ron with a sneer. "Come on Harry, I'm your girlfriend, how could you betray us?" Ginny finished. I felt my magic flare up, and I had to forcibly keep it from lashing out. "I haven't betrayed my friends. You 3 aren't my friends, you are just a trio of money-hungry, lying bastards. Not only did you steal from me, but you pretended to be my friends because I'm supposed to be the savior. For that I will never forgive you. Ginny, you and I have never dated, and we never will. You lot and Dumbledore will regret crossing me, that I can promise you. Now if you will excuse me, I have somewhere to be," I said with a blank face as I grabbed my book. "Harry, you are the savior of the wizarding world. We have never stolen a galleon from you. And we aren't being paid to be your friends. You are being ridiculous, so snap out of it and come back to Gryffindor," Ron said angrily. I felt my magic swaying darkly behind me as I turned around to look at him. "Get this through your thick skull. I am not going back to Gryffindor. Slytherin is where I belong. You will not stand there and act like you have done nothing wrong when I witnessed it. You 3 are treading on thin ice, so leave me the hell alone," I replied as my magic dropped the temperature in the hall. Ron looked absolutely livid. He slammed my book to the floor and lunged at me. I grabbed his fist, spun his arm around his back, and shoved him against the wall. "It will do you good to remember these words. If you don't stay out of my way and leave me alone, I won't hesitate to hurt you." I tried to be civil, but you are too stupid to understand that. "So leave me alone, Weasley, or you will regret it." I swiftly let go of him and grabbed my book off the floor. I glanced in their direction and noticed they looked horrified. For good measure I allowed my magic to surround them and they dropped to the floor in fear. I smirked and continued on my way to the Great Hall. Maybe that will keep those idiots away from me. I turned a final corner and made my way into the Great Hall. I sat at the end of the Slytherin table and smiled as my breakfast appeared in front of me. I was just reaching for my cup when 2 people sat on either side of me. "Hi George," Fred, I said with a smile. Hi, Harry, how are you? This morning, they asked. Well, oh, fair than dealing with the annoying trio, I am fine, I replied. Good, Fred said with a smile. George nodded. We continued to talk until Theo, Blaise, and Draco arrived and sat across from us. Good morning, Theo, Blaise. Meet Fred and George, the demon twins of Gryffindor, I said with a smirk. Hello, nice to meet you too, Theo and Blaise said in sync. Hello, it's nice to meet you as well. Harry has told us a bit about you, Theo said with a smile. All good things, we hope, they replied with questioning glances in my direction. Blaise and Theo nodded. Good, Fred and George replied. Everyone started polite conversation as we waited for Severus to bring around schedules. The other Slytherins didn't seem bothered with the appearance of my twins, so that is a good thing. Whis, Blaise, you better not cause any trouble at my house table, he said with a playful sneer. Speak of the devil, we won't, Professor Snape, they said quickly. He nodded before handing us our schedules. Monday, Wednesday, Charms, Slytherin and Hufflepuff. Potions, Slytherin and Gryffindor. Potions, Slytherin and Gryffindor. Transfiguration, Slytherin and Ravenclaw. Tuesday, Thursday, Defense against the Dark Arts, Slytherin. History of Magic, Slytherin and Hufflepuff. Herbology, Slytherin and Ravenclaw. Care of Magical Creatures, Slytherin and Gryffindor. Friday, Defense against the Dark Arts, Slytherin and Gryffindor. Transfiguration, Slytherin. Study of Ancient Runes, All Houses. Charms, Slytherin and Ravenclaw. Potions, Slytherin. Snape left us to our own devices after giving out us schedules. Well, looks like double potions with Gryffindor today, guys, I said in a bored tone. At least we get Charms with the Puffs first, Draco said with a smile. Oh, this will be fun, the Puffs are great, Theo said with an excited look. Even the twins had to agree with Theo as we finished eating. Well, we have care first, so we need to head outside, the twins said. Bye guys, Fred said as they stood up. I smirked as I got a great idea. Bye loves, I called out when they were halfway to the entrance of the Great Hall. I laughed as they turned to glare at me with red faces that could rival their hair. I just smiled before turning around. That looked suspiciously like payback, Draco said a smirk. Because it was. Come on, let's head to Charms so we aren't late, I said with a smile. Yeah, let's go guys. By the way, I told you so, Draco said to Theo and Blaise. I laughed at their shocked faces as we headed to Charms. What's up guys, I have another update for you. Hope you dudes like it. Comment any mistakes you find, or any questions you have. As always, I will see you later my dudes. Gryffindors. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Fred. George. Both twins. Charms had ended rather quickly, much to Harry's disappointment. He had nothing against potions, he just didn't want to do it with Gryffindor. However, he decided to just throw on a blank mask and walk into potions and sat down next to Draco. Ah, the blank face, what's the occasion, Potter? Draco said with a teasing smirk. I just gave him a bored look before sending a mild stinging hex his way. He yelped quietly before giving me a death stare. I just shrugged and turned towards the front just as Severus burst into the room. Today we will start on the girding potion. For those of you who haven't even glanced at your textbooks, it gives you extra endurance. The instructions are on the board. Begin, he managed to say with a sneer. Add 1 set of fairy wings. Heat until the potion turns turquoise. Add 1 measure of doxy eggs. Heat until the potion turns pink. Add the toasted dragonfly thoraxes until the potion turns red. Heat until the potion turns blue. Add de-toasted dragonfly thoraxes until the potion turns silver. Heat the potion until it turns red. Add 3 measures of doxy eggs. Add some dragonfly thoraxes. Heat the potion until it turns blue. Add 3 flying seahorses. Heat until the potion turns green. I'll grab the ingredients, I muttered. Draco nodded. I walked back to the shelves and grabbed the 4 needed ingredients and made my way back to our workstation. However, Weasley decided to knock into me with enough force to knock the doxy eggs out of my hands. I immediately latched a tendril of my magic to the container to catch it before it hit the floor. Watch where you're going, you filthy snake, he sneered out. Rather than lashing out, I just gave him an unimpressed look which seemed to annoy him further. "Cat got your tongue, traitor," he said with a smirk. I just sighed and continued to walk to my workstation. He would get what's coming to him. Weasley already harassing a fellow student, 10 points from Gryffindor. Snape said before walking back to his desk. "Here you go," I said as I handed Draco the ingredients to start our potion. "I assume you are the cause of that," he said in a bored tone. "Well, not see. Completely Weasley just seems to be obsessed with me," I said with a snicker as I added the first measure of doxy eggs. "He really needs to get better insults," Draco said with a smile. "I agree, Slimy Snake and Traitor are getting old," I remarked with a serious face that had Draco in a quiet fit of laughter. "I would get back to work if I were you boys," Snape said as he glided by our table. "Drive." ACO and I nodded and continued our potion. Small time skip. "Bottle up your attempts at the girding potion and put them on my desk," Snape said in his normal snarky voice. Everyone quickly bottled up their potions and placed them on Snape's desk. It looked as if only half the class had done their potion correctly. "You have Transfiguration next, right?" I asked Draco. "Yes, so do Blaise and Theo," he said a little too quickly. However, I disregarded it, for now that is. "Well, let's get to Transfiguration. McGonagall will kill us if we are late," I replied. Draco nodded and trekked up to Transfiguration. When we got there, I noticed that Draco quickly took the seat next to Blaise, and I smirked. "Who did you kill?" Theo asked as he sat down, and I gave him a darker smirk. "Well, no one yet, but I do believe I have stumbled upon some very interesting information," I said happily. "Merlin helped the poor sod who you have information on," he said with a nonchalant smile. "You will tell me what this information is after you verify it, correct?" he asked with a look that told me I had no choice, and I laughed. "That depends on if the people involved will allow me to. If so, then yes. However, if they want to keep it to themselves, then no," I replied. "That's fair," Theo said as McGonagall entered the classroom. "Today, students, we will be turning hedgehogs into pincushions," she said as she demonstrated the wand motions. I sighed as I turned the hedgehog into a pincushion on my second try. "Excellent work, Harry. 10 points to Slytherin," she said with a sad smile. "Thanks, Minnie," I said loud enough so only she could hear, and a smile immediately slipped onto her face as she gave me a fond look. I smiled back as she turned to continue her walk around the classroom. "She's my godmother," I said when I noticed Theo's questioning look. He made an "oh" face before nodding and continuing to work on his hedgehog pincushion. Another small time skip. Everyone seemed to be getting the hang of turning hedgehogs into pincushions when McGonagall told us to pack up our things. I glanced over at Draco and Blaise to see light blushes on both of their faces. "I knew it," I thought with a small smile as McGonagall dismissed us to lunch. Theo and I walked out into the hallway to wait on Draco and Blaise. "So you like the twins?" he suddenly stated. "Yep," I replied without missing a beat. "I knew it," he said with a victorious smirk. "Well, it is very obvious," I said with a smile as Draco and Blaise walked out of the classroom. "So how was potions?" Blaise said with a smirk. "Well, considering I am responsible for Gryffindor losing 10 points, I'd say it went pretty well," I said as we started our walk to the Great Hall. The day I mess up in charms I miss something hilarious," he said dramatically. "The best part is that Harry didn't even have to say a word," Draco said with a laugh. "Ah yes, the infamous silence that implies you're an idiot," Theo says with a dreamy look. "Keep it up, and you'll add my death glare to the list of looks you've seen," I said in a joking tone which had Theo giggling as we made it into the Great Hall. We had just taken a seat at the Slytherin table when I felt the twins sit next to me and throw their arms over my shoulders. "How's our favorite Slytherin?" they asked with smiles. That depends on who you ask," I said with a smile. "By the way," I said pulling out 4 books, "these are for you to use on your pranks. Don't ruin them and you can keep them until the end of the year," I said with a smile. "No way. These are the Marauders' journals." "How did you get these?" George finished. "Slytherins never reveal their secrets," I said with a smirk. The twins gave me a pleading look. "You know that doesn't work on me anymore," I said with a laugh. Fred huffed, and George pouted. "Oh, all right, I will tell you how I got them at the Yule Ball. Deal?" I asked with a sigh. "Deal," they replied. They hugged me and then bounded off to read the journals. I smiled slightly before looking at the Theo, Blaze, and Draco, who were giving me incredulous looks. They have you wrapped around their fingers, Theo said with a smirk. What can I say? I like them, I said with a smirk, as I finished the food on my plate. Well, Blaze and I have another class today, so we will see you guys later, Theo said as he and Blaze left the Great Hall. I nodded and saw Draco wave as he finished his food. So you up for a library trip? I asked quickly. Definitely, Draco said as he got up. Very tiny time skip. When we got to the library, we sat at the table near the restricted section. So, when were you going to tell me? I asked quietly. Tell you what? Draco asked suspiciously. That you like Blaze, duh, I said with a blank face. I watched the color drain from Draco's face, and then be replaced by a faint blush as he let out a groan. Is it that obvious? He asked quickly. Honestly, no, however. Not everyone knows you well enough to actually see through you Slytherin mask, I said with a smile. Please don't tell anyone, he said with a sigh. I won't tell anyone, I promise, I said with a smile. Thank Merlin, I don't know how my father would react to the fact that his only son fancies men, Draco said gravely. You won't know until he finds out, I asked seriously. He didn't respond. If you decide to tell him, and he reacts poorly, you're basically family now, and I will do anything to make sure my family is safe, I said sincerely. Thanks a lot, Harry, Draco said with a small smile. You're welcome. Now let's get to work on the homework for charms, I said with a smile. We laughed before pulling out the parchment, ink, and quills we needed to do our charms essay. What is up, my dudes? I have the update that was very delayed. Again, I am so sorry about that. Hopefully I will get back to updating every week now that my early college courses are over. Please point out any mistakes and errors you see so I can fix them as quickly as possible. So, as always, vote, comment, share. I will see you later, my dudes. Dumbles, Oliver Quinn, Parseltongue, Thoughts, Spells, Fred, George, both twins. Draco and I had just finished up our charms essay when a first-year Hufflepuff walked shyly to our table. I have a message for you, Harry, he said quietly. Okay, and what would that be? I said with a warm smile. The boy perked up and smiled back before answering. Professor Dumbledore wants to speak with you. He mentioned something about sugar quills. I don't know what that's about though, he said confused. I held back a groan, and just nodded. Thank you. I trailed off. He didn't mention his name. Oh, hey, my name is Oliver Quinn, he said with a blush. Well, thank you, Oliver, I said with a smile. He nodded before running off. I sighed, and glanced over Draco, who was smirking. Don't even start, I said exasperated. He ignored me. That was cute, he said with a smirk. He was an adorable first year. I have no reason to be rude, I said with a scoff. Whatever, Harry. I think you're just going soft, he said with a laugh. A soft growl escaped my throat as I tossed a stinging hex at his chest. I smirked when it hit him, and almost caused him to fall out of his seat. Who's the soft one now, Draco? I said with a blank face. Whatever, Potter. You better get to your meeting. You don't want Dumbles to be more suspicious than he already is, he said, suddenly going serious. I sighed before packing my things into my bag. Yeah. Wish me luck, Draco, he nodded, and I set off towards Dumble's office. Narrator Pav, as the former Light's savior made his way to the headmaster's office. His entire demeanor changed. Potter's posture went from tall and confident, to slightly hunched and timid, and a nervous smile planted itself on his face. When he reached the gargoyle, he whispered the password. The gargoyle hesitated, then jumped aside to reveal the moving staircase to the headmaster's office. Harry fortified his occlumency shields and made his glamour was firmly in place before jumping to the third step on the moving staircase. As soon as the staircase made it to the top, Harry got off, and knocked on the door. A few seconds later, a soft come-in sounded. The red-haired boy took a deep breath before walking into the office. He immediately had to suppress a violent jerk as his shields were viciously attacked. He let the leader of the Light see memories, albeit fake ones, of his time at the Dursleys the past summer. As quickly as it came, the attack ceased, and Harry had to fight to hold in a sigh of relief. "Have a seat, my boy. Care for a lemon drop?" the old wizard asked politely. "No, sir. I was just wondering why you wanted to see me. Am I in trouble?" Harry asked timidly. A look of slight relief passed over the headmaster's face. The grandfatherly wizard would have smirked outright, if it would not have made him seem like the bad guy. It looked like he still had his pawn under his thumb. Oh, but how wrong he was. The man had no idea that he had created the very wizard that would take him down. What is up, my dudes? Long time no see, guys. I know that this chapter has been super delayed, but I have been working all summer. This chapter is short, so I will be uploading another one later tonight. But for now, here you go. So as always, vote, comment, share. The Headmaster's Office, Parseltongue, Thoughts, Spells, Fred, George, both twins. Narrator Pav. Harry Potter silently commended himself for being able to keep up his act after his occlumency shields were attacked. It took every ounce of his self-control not to push the old man out of his head immediately. Potter was even happier that the old man seemed to think he still had a chance of pulling the boy back under his thumb. It meant that his little stunt at the welcoming feast hadn't made a giant impact, at least he hoped. "No, my boy, you are not in any trouble," the old man said with a kind smile. "I am just worried about you. Especially since you have been resorted. Do you have any idea of why that happened?" the old man asked, feigning real concern. The red-headed boy paused for a split second, and then slumped in his chair. "No, sir. I have no idea why I was resorted. I thought I belonged in Gryffindor. I loved it there," the boy said in a panicky tone. The old man fought the smirk that was trying to claw its way onto his face. "No need to worry, Harry. I know that you belong in Gryffindor. Perhaps we could talk to the hat, and get you back into your house," the old man said kindly. The redhead nodded eagerly, and the old wizard cast an accio to retrieve the hat. A couple of seconds passed, and the sorting hat landed on the ancient wizard's desk. "Ah, called upon by Albus Dumbledore, what could you possibly want from me?" the hat questioned in disdain. The old wizard frowned, and then his face morphed into a pleasant smile. "Well, hat, I need you to sort Harry here back into Gryffindor," the old Oot said with a gesture to the last Potter. The hat hesitated before uttering two simple words. "No, Albus." Then all animation left the hat, and as fell limp. Harry almost laughed outright, but stopped. Head immediately stopped when he saw a wave of pure rage wash over the headmaster's face. However, it was gone in a second, and a sad smile placed itself on the old man's face. "Well, Harry, it seems you are going to be stuck in Slytherin. Until I can talk some sense into the sorting hat," the headmaster said sadly. The redhead slumped lower in his chair before deciding to speak. "Does this mean I am a bad person, Professor?" he asked in a miserable tone. The old man could have jumped for joy. It looked like his pawn was still under his control, and he couldn't be happier. "No, no, no, my boy. T.S. is probably just a mistake on the hat's part. You are still the one who will defeat the Dark Lord. Just don't get too close to any of the snakes, and report any wrongdoings you see to me. You are still a good person," the old headmaster said with a genuine smile. "Okay, Professor. I will make sure to do that. If you don't mind, I am gonna head back to the library to study," the fiery-haired boy said quietly. The old goat nodded, and the boy left. Tilde 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 tilde. The red-haired boy got to the moving staircase, and rode it to the bottom. As he walked off the staircase and into the office corridor, his posture immediately changed. His posture went from shy and subdued to tall and confident. As he made his way out of the office corridor and into the hall, a giggle slipped past his lips. A couple of seconds later, the young redhead was doubled over laughing. It was absolutely pathetic how easy it was to fool the old goat. The boy took a couple deep breaths and recomposed himself. It would do him no good for someone to see him laughing, albeit a little evilly. He stood up, straightened his robes and made his way back to the library. What is up, my dudes? Is the long-awaited update. I will have another longer chapter up sometime this week. But for now, vote, comment, share. See you later, my dudes. The Aftermath. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Fred. George. Both twins. Narrator Pav. Harry made his way back to the library with an impassive face. He knew for a fact that Draco would love to hear how the headmaster had sank to try to pull Harry back under his thumb. He made sure to kill he reached the library, because he could feel another laughing fit coming. Harry was still trying to wrap his head around the fact that he had just fooled the most powerful wizard of this time. It was hilarious to him. As he got closer to the library, he noticed a couple first years were looking at him with fear in their eyes. He realized his magic was flowing around him darkly. He immediately reined it in, and gave the first years an apologetic look. They seemed relieved as he entered the library. Harry's Pav. I walked into the library and noticed immediately that the twins were sitting with Draco, Blaise, Theo, and surprisingly Oliver. He was giggling as the twins dramatically reenacted something their brother Percy had done. I smiled slightly, and silently walked up behind Fred. He was too busy dramatically fanning himself to notice. Oliver saw me, and I gave him a sly smirk, and flicked the back of Fred's neck. He jumped a foot in the air with a yell, and everyone doubled over laughing. He turned around and glared at me, and I just gave him an innocent smile as I sat between he and George at the table. Well, you seem to be in a scarily good mood, Draco said with a suspicious look on his face. I let a vicious smirk cross my face before I replied. Oh, trust me, you have no idea, I said with a laugh. Well, are you going to tell us what happened? Theo said after a brief pause. I gave he and Blaise a questioning look. Yes, we want the long version, Blaise said immediately, and I nodded before launching into the story. Time skip. We all sat in silence for a couple minutes, and suddenly Draco was laughing, and everyone else followed shortly after. I just smirked. Is he really that desperate? Blaise asked after they all regained their composure. Yes, I mean honestly, I commend you for your ability to act, Theo said next. You would be amazed at how quickly Harry can change his personality, Draco said with a smirk, and I growled at him. I knew what he was trying to do. Oh, you have to show us, Blaise said immediately. I sighed, and the twins gave me a worried glance. I suppose it wouldn't hurt, I said stiffly. Narrator Pav. Harry took a deep breath and closed his eyes. The imposing Slytherin's body language immediately morphed. He seemed to curl in on himself. All menace and confidence drained out of him. When he opened his eyes, they were wide with worry and paranoia. He went from confident Slytherin to scared abused Gryffindor right before the group's eyes. Draco and Blaise immediately felt guilty. How could the two be so stupid? They knew what had gone on in Harry's life. Draco more so than Blaise. He couldn't believe he had made such an ill-thought remark. However, it was as if they had blinked, and every ounce of vulnerability and fear left Harry Potter. He was immediately back to his scary confident self. An icy glare fixed on his face. George and Fred immediately grabbed Harry's hands under the table. Whoa, that was incredible, it was like you cast a glamour on yourself, Oliver said with wonder in his voice. Harry looked over at him, the glare melted of his face and he smiled at Oliver. Thank you, he said quickly. Oliver nodded with a look of awe on his face. Harry shook his head before looking back at Draco, Theo and Blaise. Harry Pav. I look back at the trio and Draco gave me an apologetic look, which I just shook off. I gave him my I'm fine look, and he sighed. Well, I understand now how you fooled Bumbles so easily, Theo said quickly. I gave him a chuckle to get rid of the tension in the room. Yes, Draco has told me countless times that I should go into acting, I said with a slightly tight smile. Yeah, acting. Blaise let out a nervous laugh, and I sighed. Okay, moving on. We have major things to discuss, I said with a serious look on my face. Theo and Blaise looked lost. I sighed and gave Draco an exhausted look. He nodded before explaining it to the duo. He means the plans for our esteemed headmaster, Draco said with a scoff. Realization hit the two of them like a truck. Smirks lit their faces and they sat up a little straighter. I smiled slightly before silently asking my twins to distract Oliver. They nodded, and reluctantly let go of my hands. Fred grabbed Oliver, and swung him in the air, which caused him to laugh. Have you ever played Exploding Snap? They questioned him as he was led out the door. Draco looked over at me, and I nodded before leaning closer to the three of them. Do any of you have ideas on how to get the old goat out of Hogwarts? I asked quietly. Well, we have you as an upper hand. If you can keep the old fool convinced that you are still his pawn, that could give us time to think something up. Draco said smartly. Other than that, no, we don't have any advantages, Theo said. I racked my brain for something else we could use to our advantage, and then it hit me like a ton of bricks. An evil smile lit my face, and the boys looked scared. What on earth could warrant a smile like that? Draco asked in a subdued voice. Oh, not much, just look forward to defense against the dark arts tomorrow, I said, my smile just got darker. Needless to say, Draco, Theodore, and Blaise were excited for what could happen tomorrow. However, the couldn't he LP the small amount of fear they felt because of the murderous smile on Harry's face. What is up, my dudes? Sorry for the wait on this update. Senior year has got me stretched thin on time. Couple that with early college classes, a job, and volleyball, I barely have time to sleep. Ha ha ha, that is besides the point. Last night, during a volleyball game, a chick on the team we were playing ECIDED to spike a ball as hard as she could into my face. We were maybe a foot apart, and now my nose is broken. Which means no volleyball, and hopefully more time to update. Enough of my rambling, you guys probably don't even read these. Whatever. So as always, comment, vote, share. See you later, my dudes. Defense against the dark arts. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Fred. George. Both twins. To say that Harry was excited for defense against the dark arts was an understatement. If you had asked those around him, they would tell you that he was basically vibrating with anticipation. Which was confusing to most of his friends, considering the new professor was allegedly a member of the rumored Order of the Phoenix. Why would Harry be excited to be taught by someone like that? Little did they know, all of their questions would answered after lunch. At lunch, Harry's small group were sat at the Slytherin table like normal. However, the look that was on Harry's face was far from normal. He had a sadistic look on his face as he ate his lunch. Draco, Theo, Blaise, and the twins were worried. They knew that whatever warranted that smirk was not good. Alas, every time they asked him what the look was for, he just told them to wait until Dada. This was irksome, mostly for the twins, since they would not be in the same class as Harry and the rest of their friends. The only thing that kept them from pouting outright was the fact that they knew they would be filled in on what happened as soon as Dada let out. Little did the group know, they were not the only ones who had noticed the look on Harry's face. Professors Snape and Moody also saw the look. Snape had a feeling he knew exactly what had the Potter smiling like that, and he didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Hopefully, the boy had enough sense to keep himself in check. Professor Moody simply grinned, and took a swig out of the flask from his hip. This group of students would hopefully be interesting. Harry, Draco, Theo, and Blaise were some of the first Slytherins to make it to the Dada classroom. They chose 4 desks in the front of the right side of the classroom. Gryffindors usually sat on the left. Harry was closest to the wall, Theo on his right. Draco was directly behind Harry, with Blaise sitting directly behind Theo. Harry gave Draco a knowing look before the rest of the Slytherins filtered in. They had all started polite conversation when loud laughing and talking was heard from the corridor. The door burst open, and in came the boisterous Gryffindors. Half of the Slytherins suppressed groans, while the other half outright sneered at the group. Soon, the thump of Mad-Eye Moody's wooden leg was heard outside in the corridor. Most students got out their books and put them on their desks. Put those books away, you won't be needing them, Moody growled out as he finally made it into the classroom. The students were stunned, but did what they were told. The sadistic grin on Harry's face widened a little bit as he put his book away. Professor Lupin sent me a letter on the dark creatures you have covered, and you are very ahead when it comes to that. However, you are very behind on curses, finished Moody, with a swig from his flask. So let's get straight into curses. Technically, I am supposed to teach you counter curses and leave it at that. You aren't supposed to be taught about any of the darker illegal curses until 6th year. But it seems Dumbledore believes your nerves can handle it, so I am inclined to believe the same. Honestly, how are you going to know how to defend against a curse you have never seen? An enemy isn't gonna explain what a curse does to you before he does it, so let's get started. Moody got heavily to his feet. Before clearing his throat, so, can anyone tell me which curses are most heavily punished by wizarding law? He questioned quickly. Many hands raised reluctantly, including Weasley's. Mad Eye pointed at him and he stuttered before answering. My dad told me about one, I think as was you the Imperious Curse, or something like that, Ron said hesitantly. Aha, Moody nodded. Your father would know a bit about the Imperious Curse after the trouble it gave the Ministry years ago, Moody said. He walked to his desk, and opened a drawer. Out of the drawer he pulled a glass jar out with 3 large spiders inside. Harry looked over at Theo and noticed a disbelieving look on his face, and a dark chuckle escaped his lips. Theo looked at him with a look that said there is no way he is serious. Harry just smirked and gave Theo a sharp nod. Draco and Blaise looked at Harry soon after, and saw the sadistic grin cover his features again, and were speechless. Mad Eye Moody was actually going to demonstrate the Unforgivables. Every Slytherin in the room held their breath as Moody pulled a spider out of the jar. Surely their professor wouldn't what they thought he would. However, it seemed Moody was crazier than he looked, because, seconds later his wand was drawn, and the spell Imperio was whispered. A yellowish-green light shot out of his wand and hit the spider. Immediately the spider jumped out of his hand and spun down on a strand of silk. The Slytherins were shocked, all except for one, Harry Potter, who was grinning like a madman. This curse allows the caster to have total control of their victim. Years ago many witches and wizards were being controlled by this curse, and it is hard to spot. I will teach you how to throw this curse off, however it is very hard. And it would be better for you just to avoid it at all costs, Mad Eye commented as he put the now dancing spider back into the jar. Some students visibly relaxed, only to 10. Say as Moody drew another spider from the jar. Can anyone tell me another illegal curse? Moody questioned quickly. It surprised a few students in the room to see Neville's hand reluctantly join the other students' hands in the air. Moody almost smirked as he called on the boy. Longbottom is it? He questioned. Neville nodded. All right, what is the next curse? Neville's voice shook, but he answered the question nonetheless. The Cruciatus Curse, he mumbled out. Moody nodded before again pointing his wand at the spider. First we will need the spider to be bigger so you can better see what this curse does. Moody commented before casting Engorgio on the spider. It grew to 2 times the size of a tarantula. Again Moody pointed his wand at the spider before muttering the incantation, Crucio. The spider immediately curled in on itself, and began to twitch violently as a red light hit it in the middle of the back. Harry looked around the room, and saw a few Slytherins flinch. Stop it! Seamus Finnegan suddenly screamed. Harry looked over to him, but noticed the boy was staring at a visibly sick Neville. Moody ceased the curse, and reduced the spider back to its original size. Pain. That is the sole purpose of this curse. You don't need knives, or screws to torture someone, if you know this curse, Moody remarked as he took the last spider out of the jar. All right, anybody else know an illegal curse? Moody questioned for the last time. Most people looked too sick to even fathom what the next curse could be. Harry's smirk grew vicious as his hand was raised in the air, 3 seconds before Hermione's. Moody surveyed the room, before his eyes landed on Harry. Okay, Potter, can you tell me what the last illegal curse is? Moody asked with a barely their eyebrow raised. Ari had a few unwelcome thoughts of his parents before he nodded. Avada Kedavra, Harry answered simply. More than just the Slytherins flinched when he said this. Yes, Avada Kedavra, the last and worst curse, the killing curse. Moody once again pointed his wand at the defenseless spider in his hand. Avada Kedavra was whispered, and a blinding green light, the same shade as Harry's eyes, hit the spider. Many students got pale when the spider rolled over on its back, not visibly harmed, but obviously dead. The room was dead silent until Moody was speaking again. These curses require a good bit of magic, but that doesn't matter. I am not teaching you how to cast them, I am teaching you how to counter them. These curses are known as the Unforgivables, and anyone caught casting these earns a life sentence in Azkaban. Now get to writing, Moody bellowed. The last 30 minutes of class were spent writing down notes on the unforgivable curses. Tilde 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 tilde. Harry practically skipped out of Dada. Only the knowledge that he had a reputation to uphold kept him from doing so. How did you know? Draco questioned on their way to their next class. Harry looked at him for a second before smirking. You will know all in due time, Draco, all in due time, he said with a normal happy smile. This alone left Draco stunned, until he realized he hadn't got the answers he wanted. Which had Draco running to catch up with Harry. What is up, my dudes? Here is the long-awaited next chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. I should be able to get another update out sometime in the next 2 weeks, hopefully. For those of you who read the author's note on the last chapter, you know I broke my nose. Well, it turns out, this is completely blocking my right nasal cavity, which means it is slightly hard for me to breathe out of my nose. So on November 15th I will be having surgery to fix that. Which means you guys may get 2 chapters in the next 2 weeks so I can rest after surgery. Nevertheless, I hope you guys enjoyed the chapter. And as always, vote, comment, share. I will see you later, my dudes. 17. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Fred. George. Both twins. Quick I have ECIDED to put Fred and George in the same year as Harry to make the story flow better in the future. I apologize if this bothers any of you. Narrator Pav. The remainder of the Slytherin's classes seemed to drag on forever. Especially for Draco, Theo, and Blaise, they were antsy to know how Harry knew what was going to happen today. However, anytime they asked, he simply told them they would know all in due time. It was frustrating, and they had decided to get him to spill after dinner. They were sick and tired of being told to wait. They wanted to know what Harry knew, and they would, if it killed them. Harry, Pav. I had been avoiding questions from Draco, Blaise, and Theo all day. They had been badgering me about Dada, and I had managed to dodge every question. I made sure then so. They couldn't corner me in the common room. I was going to make them wait as long as I could just to see what they would do. I was reading a Rune book when I heard all 3 then sit down. I looked up and noticed the annoyed looks on their faces, and gave them a smirk. You have been avoiding us all day. Don't think that we didn't notice, Draco said with a glare in his face. It has gone on long enough. So you were going to tell us how you knew, Theo said with his own glare. Okay guys, I will tell you, but not now. There are too many people who could hear, I said quietly. They looked at each other and then to me, and nodded. That will work, I suppose, Blaise said with a passive face. I just nodded, and watched as my twins stood up angrily from the Gryffindor table and stormed over to our table. I looked over and saw Ron, Hermione, and Ginny looked equally as enraged. Fred sat on my left and George on my right. They were fuming, and that did not sit well with me. Before I could get a word out, Draco was already speaking. What happened? You two look like you could murder someone, Draco asked with a quirked eyebrow. The annoying trio has decided for us that we are not allowed to talk to Harry anymore. They even talked out Mother and she agreed. I wrapped my arms around the twins and gave them hugs. They did not deserve this, and I would not tolerate it. No one had the right to tell my twins that they had to do anything. What are you guys gonna do? I asked them gently. I didn't want to be the reason that they were in trouble with family, regardless of how much I liked them. Well, we have been making decisions for ourselves for years. They haven't ever cared how we spent our time. So we are going to do what we want. And that means we aren't going to stop talking to you. Just because they want us to. I squeezed them a bit tighter before letting them go. Well, lovelies, you are always welcome to sit at our table, I said with a smirk. Draco, Theo, and Blaise mirrored my smirk before nodding. The twins had small blushes on their faces as they nodded. Right before our eyes plates appeared in front of them, I felt Hogwarts, magic surround me in almost a hug, and I smiled. "Thanks guys," they said quietly, and we all smiled. Dinner continued as usual, and far too quickly for my liking. I was telling my twins goodnight and heading to the common room. It was time to face the 100 million questions that I knew Draco, Theo and Blaze would have. We walked to our dorm, and I had barely gotten into pajamas before they bombarded me with questions. "All right, we have waited long enough, so spill. How in the name of Merlin did you know that Mad Eye was going to do a lesson on the Unforgivables?" Blaze asked as I sat down on my bed. "Firstly, Mad Eye isn't who he says he is. That is Barty Crouch Jr. under Polyjuice," I said nonchalantly. Theo almost fell out of his bed in shock. "And how, pray tell, do you know that?" Dre asked breathlessly. I smirked as I pulled out the Marauder's map, and opened it up. I tapped it, and said the magic words, magic words, and watched the amazed looks on their faces as it came to life. I beckoned them over, and laughed as they scrambled over to get a good look at it. "This map shows everyone what they're doing, where they are, every minute of every day." I tell them the same thing He twins told me when they gave it to me. They looked at me before nodding for me to continue. I pointed to Mad Eye's office, which held Mad Eye and Crouch's names in it. "Wait, if Crouch is Mad Eye, how is Mad Eye also there?" Blaze asked. "Crouch is using polyjuice that he is brewing himself, so he needs Moody there to get his DNA," I explained. "Okay, how do you know all of this?" Theo asked as realization dawned on Draco's face. "You didn't just got to one meeting, did you?" he asked with a smirk, and smiled and shook my head. "Ah, you figure it out." "No, I didn't go to just one meeting. I went to every meeting they had until school started back," I said. Realization dawned on Theo and Blaze's faces. "You've met and spoken to the Dark Lord?" Theo asked, shock in his voice. "Yes, I even helped him plan a few things out this year." "Does that satisfy all your questions?" I asked with a yawn. "For the most part, yes, but we have one more question for you," Draco said with a smirk. "All right, shoot," I said passively. "What are you going to do about the twins?" Draco asked innocently. "I don't know at the current moment. I can't even be sure that they like me," I said quietly. They nodded, and bid me good night. And I sighed. It would be nice to have one normal year. What is up, my dudes? I know a bunch of you probably thought that this story was on hold or abandoned, but that is not the case. I have just been monumentally busy with the path of life I have chosen to follow. I can happily say that this story will be back to getting regular updated. In case you didn't read the AN at the top, I have decided to put the twins in Harry's year. That's all I have at the moment, so as always, comment, vote, share. I'll see you later, my dudes. 18. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Fred. George. Both twins. Harry. Pav. It had been about a month since we had been back to Hogwarts, and things were going pretty smoothly, which was slightly nerve-wracking. The twins and I had gotten closer, if that was possible, which the guys noticed and give me shit for all the time, which I find hilarious, as do the twins. We had made a little headway on our plan to get Dumbles out of the castle. We dug up a lot about the old goat that would definitely show him in a new light. I was on my way to the room of requirements to meet up with my little group when I bumped into someone literally. I quickly thrust my hand out to grab the front of said person's robes when I saw that it was Neville, and it looked like he had been crying. I stood him up right before levitating his books into his hands. "Sorry, Longbottom, I didn't mean to run into you. Are you okay?" I questioned sincerely. He winced at the use of his last name, but I figured we weren't close enough anymore for me to use his first name. "Please just call me Neville, Harry, we're still friends," he said with a small smile. "Alrighty then, Neville, but you didn't answer my question. Are you okay?" I asked again. "Don't worry, Harry, it's nothing," he said with a sigh. I gave him my "that's bullshit" look, and he sighed again. "Fine, Ron and Hermione have just given me trouble recently. They have this new interest in me that is unnerving," he said in confusion. I cursed under my breath before answering. "Neville, whatever you do, do not get close to them. It will lead to your destruction," I said seriously. He looked confused, and I sighed. "All right, can I trust that what I'm about to show and explain to you, you'll keep it secret?" I asked quietly. He pondered before he made a decision. "I swear on my magic, Harry," he said confidently. I gasped as I felt my magic flare and then settle, accepting his vow. I gave him a smile before gesturing for him to follow me as I made my way up the stairs to the 7th floor. When we got to the wall across from Barnabas the Barmy, I paced in front of it 3 times and laughed when Neville's jaw dropped as the door appeared. "Come on then," I said as I opened the door. Neville closed his mouth before following me through the door. Everyone looked up and smiled, before their stares turned icy as they saw Neville. I growled at them lowly and their faces relaxed immediately. And Neville looked around meekly. "The annoying trio are trying to recruit him for the goat," I said quickly, and they all nodded with anger on their faces. "I am so confused," Neville said quietly. I laughed as I guided to one of the 3 open chairs left in the room currently. He sat down quickly and looked at me expectantly. "You aren't really gonna tell that cower?" I leveled Blaze with an icy glare that had him choking on the remaining words in his sentence. I felt 2 hands on my shoulders and looked up to see Fred and Knox on their faces, and I sighed. I gav. Blaze one more glare before clearing my face, and looking over to Neville, who was visibly shaken. "Firstly, Blaze, you will not talk to my god brother like that. Secondly, in case you didn't hear me. The first time the idiots and the goat are trying to recruit him, so yes, I am going to tell him everything, understand? Thirdly, are you okay?" I asked in the end. He looked awestruck before simply nodding. "Good. Sorry you had to see that, Nev. What exactly do you want to know?" I asked in a reassuring tone. He gulped before contemplating his answer, and coming to a decision. Everything if that's okay," he said timidly. I glanced to everyone, and they all nodded. I sighed. "All right, Nev, buckle up. This is a roller coaster ride from hell," I said with a small smile. Time skip because we LL know this part and it doesn't need to be repeated again. I sighed as I finished the story for the umpteenth time, and looked over to Nev, who was frozen for a bit, when suddenly it was like a dam broke. His magic exploded from his body in a rage. It ripped through the air, wreaking havoc throughout the room. Everyone excluding me was blown out of their seats. I was expecting it. I stood and approached him slowly. His magic washed over me before deciding I wasn't a threat. I pulled Nev into a strong hug. "It's all right, brother, that is in the past. I am okay, and they can't get a hold of me anymore," I said to him quietly. He stiffened before wrapping his arms around tightly as his magic receded. I rubbed his back gently as he came back to himself with a shudder and a sigh. He pulled back, and I saw angry tears on his cheeks. "Why in Merlin's name is it always you, and I har?" he asked with a bitter laugh, and I chuckled. "If I knew the answer I would tell you, Nev, I really would," I said with a sigh, and he simply nodded. I waved my hand and the room pieced itself back together. I looked over and the others were frozen in shock. "What in the fuck just happened?" Theo asked in a hysterical tone. Nev and I laughed as the others nodded furiously in agreement. "Nev may seem weak, but he is everything but. He's just real good at hiding it," I replied simply, and he nodded. "Holy shit," Blaze said softly. "Sorry for assuming you were weak, Longbottom," he said finally. Theo and Draco nodded in agreement, and Nev chuckled. "Don't worry about it, and please, we're friends, just call me Neville, or Nev," he said with a smile. They nodded and the twins got up and gave him oats on the shoulders. "Glad to see you're back, little brother," he smiled up at them, and we all retook our seats. "All right, now that is over, first things first, getting Nev to Gringotts is the new priority, and then we can discuss the plans for the goat." The others nodded, but how were we going to accomplish that? What is up, my dudes? I'm back with another update. As you can see, this was mostly about Neville joining the group. That is because a few of you wanted him to be added, and I thought that was a lovely idea. So here you go as always. Vote, comment, share. See you later, my dudes. 19. The Goblet. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Fred. George. Both twins. Harry. Pav. We had been deliberating about how to proceed for a couple hours when I realized that it was almost dinner time. We had blown through our entire break before dinner without realizing it. "You guys probably haven't noticed, but we have 30 minutes to dinner. We should probably head towards the Great Hall," I said nonchalantly. They all looked perplexed before. "Nev, you of course are allowed to sit with us," Theo said quietly, and Nev smiled. I chuckled before standing and walking out the door, the twins on each side, Draco and Blaze slightly behind them and beside them. Nev and Theo were slightly behind and beside those two. In a slight versus shape. We made our way into the Great Hall. and as the doors opened people stared as he made our way to the table. Especially the Slytherins and Sev as we sat down. The twins beside me, Draco and Blaze in front of us, and Nev and Theo beside them. I looked up to the staff table and Sev's eyes were wide. I looked down our table, everyone was shocked. Dre, are those looks what I think they're for? I asked quietly. He looked around before his eyes went wide. The others peeked around cautiously and they mirrored Dre's expression. Yes, hard those looks do mean what you think they mean. I gave him a sinister smirk that he mirrored. We are very confused. Right, the twins chorused, and I smiled, and gestured for Dre to explain. It seems we have accidentally established a hierarchy in Slytherin, which is a feat by itself, but the fact that it contains 3 Gryffindors is unheard of, he explained quickly. The twins and Nev seemed to understand, and smirks crossed their faces. Suddenly the old goat stood up with a large smile smeared across his face. Before we begin, I have an announcement to make. Hogwarts will be hosting this year's Triwizard tournament, he said with glee as he waved his wand and a flaming goblet appeared on a raised dais. I heard a few Slytherins gasp and knew this must be bad. I looked over to Draco. An explanation and he just pointed back to Dumbles. Many of you are too young to know what the tournament is, so I will explain. The tournament consists of 3 tasks varying in difficulty. To win, you must get the most points total of all 3 tasks. The prize is eternal glory and a 2,000 galleon reward. These tasks have the potential to be life-threatening, so only students 17 or older will be allowed to participate. I will be personally setting an age line to make sure these rules are followed. As I said before, we are hosting this tournament of age students from Durmstrang and Beauxbatons will be coming to our humble school. They will be here next week. That is when we will be allowing people to add their names to the goblet. That is all. Dinner is served, he said with a twinkle and a grandfatherly smile. The hall was silent until it suddenly burst in a cacophony of chatter, upset huffs and outraged cries. Then there were the few who were still trying to process everything the headmaster just said. Why in Merlin's beard would anyone want to risk their lives for this tournament? I asked shocked, then I saw Fred and George's faces. Nope, no way, I said immediately. They looked at me with puppy eyes. The answer is still no, I said with a huff. Fred let out a sad whimper, and George's eyes got glassy immediately. Something in me lurched, and I jerked slightly. I was confused. It felt like a burning sensation, and it got worse the longer the twins looked devastated. I panicked slightly. This has never happened before and I had no idea what it meant. The one thing I was certain of was that I needed to make my twins happy quickly. I immediately changed my mind, and the burning eased slightly. Fine, but do not be upset if the age line foils whatever plan you have, I said with a huff. Immediately George's eyes cleared and they had giant smiles on their faces. The burning disappeared. Thanks, Rye, they said happily as they trapped me in a hug, and I let out a content sigh before they let me go. I shook my head at them and started putting food on my plate. When I looked up, the group looked at me in a mix of shock and confusion, Draco being shocked, and I raised my eyebrow at them. Draco gave me a look that clearly meant later and I nodded at him with a sigh. So how many people do you think are going to enter from here? Neville asked quietly. I shrugged. No idea, but 3 galleons says I will somehow be entered, I said with a huff. Theo and Blaze scoffed and both shook my hand. You're on Potter, no way you get entered, they said together. Never bet against Harry, especially with matters that involve him. He is hardly ever wrong, George said as he took a sip of his pumpkin juice. Draco, Fred, and Neville nodded. On a completely different topic. We really need a name for our little group, I said as dessert came around. The others looked pensive and nodded. Ye be nice, Theo said. How about tomorrow on Outbreak before Podio? NS we get together and brainstorm until we pick one out, Nev suggested. We all looked at him and nodded. Before I realized dinner was over, we were saying bye to Nev and the twins before heading down to our dorm. I changed into PJs right after I set my book bag down, and got comfortable on my bed with a book. The others also got comfortable, and Draco came to sit at the end of my bed. I put my book down and sat up. So why were you so shocked at dinner? I asked with genuine confusion in my voice. He sighed deeply before shaking his head and looking up at me. Did your inheritance say you came into a partial or a full? He asked. A partial. Ragnarok said I had a creature inheritance as well, I answered confused. Did he say when, and what creature you are? He asked again. He saw it. It should happen on my 17th, but he wasn't sure since I already had part of it, and no, I don't know what I am, I answered with more confusion. Do you know if you'll have a mates? He asked finally. Yeah, I will, I answered again. Why? What happened at dinner tonight looked immensely like a dominant mate caring for their submissive, he said quietly. I gasped slightly. What did it feel like? He asked again. Like a lurch and then burning, I said immediately. He nodded. We can't be too sure because you haven't come into your inheritance, but it looks like either both or one of the twins is your mate. I wouldn't tell them until you know for sure, he said seriously, and I nodded. Holy shit, I breathed out, and he laughed. Yup, good night mate, I laughed at him and bid him good night. One or both of the twins could be my mate. I hope it's both. I couldn't stand hurting either of them, but I won't know for sure until I get my creature inheritance. Maybe this year won't be so bad after all. What is up my dudes? Here is the next chapter, hope you enjoyed. The Triwizard tournament has come to Hogwarts, and Harry may have found a mates. However, time will only tell. I need help deciding a couple things, so hopefully you guys can help me. I need help coming up with Harry and the twins' creatures, and the name for the group. I have a couple A is for the creatures but no clue for the group. So I ask that you guys leave suggestion in the comments next to their words below. Creatures. Group name. Thank you so much, and as always, comment, vote, share. I will see you later my dudes. 20. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Fred. George. Both twins. Harry. Pav. It was already Monday, and I was dreading it. Today the students from the other schools would be arriving. This marks the first day that names would be allowed to be entered into the goblet, and I just knew my name would be put in somehow. I sighed as I got out of bed and went to change into my uniform. When I came out, everyone was still asleep and I sighed. I went over to all of their beds and shook them awake. Once they were all awake, I told them they had 30 minutes to be down for breakfast. They agreed and started to get ready, as I made my way to the Great Hall. I made it to the Slytherin table without any disturbances and sat down at the table. Suddenly my twins appeared at the table next to me. Good morning dolls, I said with a small smile, as I watched light blushes grace their cheeks. Good morning, Hazza, they finished with smiles and I laughed. That's new, I said in a content tone. Yup, I like it, I replied. We started on our breakfast when Parkinson appeared, and I growled. She flinched slightly and then sat down in front of me meekly. Before you get mad, I just wanted to come over here and apologize. What I said at the welcoming feast was way out of line and vile. You're right, I am a naive girl who judges people to make myself feel better. I am too caught up in my parents' ideals, and I want to say from the bottom of my heart that I am sorry. I want to do better, and I am asking if you would please teach me. We do, and have to even be friends. I just want to be better than I am, she said quietly. I sat stunned for a moment. I couldn't believe she was apologizing. I looked to the twins and they gave me minuscule nods, and I sighed. All right Parkinson, I forgive you, but I'm warning you now, I have been betrayed by friends before. I won't stand for it again. If I find you're lying to me you will regret it. Fair? I asked. She nodded immediately. All right then, welcome to the friend group. When everyone else comes down they can show you where you can sit, I said with a small smile. Thank you so much, you won't regret this, she said with a genuine smile. I laughed quietly, and the others suddenly appeared at the table. They looked confused at Parkinson's appearance. She apologized and meant it, so I figured we should welcome her to the group, I said calmly. The others looked at each other, then me, then her, and nodded. All right Parkinson, Nev will be here shortly so you can either sit next to him or Theo, your choice. Dre said warmly and she smiled. I'll sit next to Theo if he doesn't mind, and please call me Pansy, she said with a smile, and we all nodded as she took her seat. Okay, Pansy, let me introduce you to my demon twins of Gryffindor, I said as I threw an arm around both of them. Hi, hello, hi guys, she said with a small wave. Suddenly Nev appeared at the table with a giant smile on his face. Hi guys, and Parkinson, he said with a smile. Just Pansy will do, she said politely, and he nodded. Sue, I know we said we were gonna come up with a name later. But I have an idea and wanted to see if you guys liked it. He paused and we all nodded for him to continue. What about Cirque? I rolled it around in my head for a minute and a smile appeared on my face. I looked up to see the others with similar smiles. Oh, it's perfect, Blaze basically purred, and we all nodded. From now on we would be known as Cirque. Tilde 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 time skip to potions tilde 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 tilde. D. During potions we were allowed to partner up with anyone that we wanted, which meant we could sit on either side of the room. Nev and my twins immediately walked over to the Slytherin side of the room. My twins were partners. Theo and I were partners, Dre and Blaze were partners and Nev partnered with Pansy. We were all kind of working together, which Snape didn't seem to mind. All of us were a boo. Halfway through our potions when Granger and Weasley walked over to our side of the room. Snape was watching them like a hawk. Fred, George, you know what Mom said about hanging out with Harry and the snakes, Weasley sneered. I snapped my head in Weasley's direction and glared at him. Fred looked at George, and they both looked at Weasley and just scoffed. This seemed to enrage him. If you don't come back to the Gryffindor side right now, I'm gonna tell her you two aren't listening, he said with a growl in his tone. My glare darkened and a low growl started in my chest. Nev looked up and put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. The growl quieted but didn't stop as I watched how my twins would handle this. Then tell her then we don't care, it never mattered before, they replied. D with a sigh and went back to their potions. Weasley looked taken aback before he fixed his gaze on me and sneered. This is your fault, traitor. He sneered at me. I simply gave him a smirk and he got visibly angry. Professor Snape does not look too pleased with your presence, Weasley. I suggest you go back to your side and leave my twins alone. I finished with a growl. Nev squeezed my shoulder harder. Weasley looked scared for half a second, when suddenly a loud whine echoed through the room. We looked over to Weasley and Granger's cauldron as it suddenly exploded. I swear Snape turned red as he yelled at them. Did you two imbeciles not read the directions? You are not supposed to leave your potion unattended for more than 5 minutes. 30 points from Gryffindor and detention with me for a week. Go clean up your mess. He sneered at them. He looked around the room before ordering us to K as a whole smirked as we finished our potions. Tilde time skip to dinner. Bobaddins and Durst. Rang have already arrived because I hate writing that scene tilde. The students from the other schools arrived and had already picked tables to sit at. Durmstrang was at the end of our table, and Bobat. Ons had integrated themselves amongst the Ravenclaws. We had offered for the Durmstrangs to sit among us but they politely declined, so we continued conversation as normal when suddenly Luna seemed to glide over to us. Hello Harry Potter, and Harry Potter's friends, she said with a dreamy smile on her face. Everyone smiled at her. Good evening Luna, how are you doing? I asked kindly. She faltered slightly. As well as I usually am, she said quietly, and I glared at the Ravenclaws. Nev also picked up on this and glared at them as well. Well, how about you start sitting with us, little sister? I asked her with a smile. Oh, I would love to, if that is all right with the rest of the group, she said with excitement in her tone. Of course you can sit with us, Luna, Theo said with a smile. Everyone else nodded in agreement. Yeah, you can sit next to me, Nev said as he made room for her. She walked over to him and sat down, and suddenly a plate appeared in front of her. She looked amazed. Can I ask why you called her little sister? Pansy inquired. Blaze also looked confused. Ohar has called me that ever since he met me. He helped me get all the stuff that my housemates took from me back. She said with a smile. The others nodded. So that's why you and Nev glared at her table, Pansy said, and Nev and I nodded. Pansy and Blaze nodded back, and gave the Ravenclaw glares. Luna giggled. George, Fred, how have you two been? She asked them politely. We have been great, sis. Thanks for asking, they said with smiles on their faces. She smiled back, and we all started eating as food appeared on the table. Cirque was steadily growing, and the fun had yet to begin. What is up, my dudes? Here is chapter 20, the last chill chapter before excuse. My language before shit starts hitting the fan. The Triwizard tournament is a few chapters away, and you know what that means. Things that have been buried are about to come to light. As you can see, I have decided on a group name, but I'm still kinda iffy on creatures. Also Pansy and Luna have been added to the group, who knows what that could do in the future. Anyways, as always, vote, comment, share. See you later my dudes. 21. Parseltongue. Thoughts. Spells. Fred. George. Both twins. Harry. Pav. Dinner had ended and I followed my twins to the goblet where they were going to attempt to put their names in. The rest of Cirque stood around me, Nev with his hand on my shoulder as they drank their aging potions and jumped over the age line. I held my breath as they celebrated and dropped their names into the goblet. Suddenly the line quivered and the twins were blown out of the circle and started growing beards. I chuckled quietly as they wrestled on the floor, blaming each other. Madame Pomfrey come bustling down the hallway and started scolding them as she led them to the infirmary. We watched as most of the Durmstrangs and Bobattens dropped their names into the goblet. Along with a few of our very own Hogwarts students. Cirque as a whole cheered when a Slytherin student dropped their names into the goblet. We watched for a bit longer and then parted ways to our dorms. Once Dre, Theo, and Blaze made to our rooms, we changed and sat in the common room in comfy clothes. So what are the odds that your name gets put into the goblet? Theo asked as we got settled in front of the fireplace. Oh, it's almost guaranteed, especially if the old goat wants my name there, I said with a sigh as Loki settled himself on my lap. The boys nodded and I pet Loki absent-mindedly. What are you gonna do if your name pops out? Blaze asked with a worried look on his face. Try to get it taken out, but if not, stay alive, and maybe win if I can manage it. Don't worry, it will take more than a tournament to get rid of me, I said with a small smile. This seemed to calm him slightly and I went quiet as they conversed. Master, you seem worried. I suppose I am Loki. Why? Is it because of the redheads you seem fond of? No, Loki, I chuckled. Then what is it? I am worried about this tournament and what Dumbles has planned for me. But you told the others you weren't worried. I don't want them to be worried about me. Do you want me to bite that gross old man, Master? While that is a wonderful idea, Loki, not at the moment, I said with another chuckle. Well, if you ever do let me know, Master, I will do it gladly. I will, Loki. He seemed to smile for a bit before snuggling his face into the crook of my neck. I smiled lightly and pet him before looking up at the boys. They had gone quiet and looked to be asleep with content smiles on their face. They didn't tired earlier, I would have to ask them about it in the morning. I smiled before getting up and levitating the boys and taking them up to our room and tucking them into their separate beds. I settled into my own bed with Loki on my chest. He shifted slightly before getting comfortable and rifted off to sleep. Tomorrow was sure to be fun. Time skip brought to you by Protective Harry. I woke up to the sound of Loki moving around and the boys getting ready. I sighed and gently woke Loki. He hissed in annoyance before moving to curl around my neck. I got up and noticed everyone was half dressed. I cast a tempest and saw we had about 45 minutes to get to breakfast. I growled lowly before grabbing my uniform, walking to the bathroom and changing. I got back and noticed Draco was having trouble with the back of his hair. I smiled. Brush, Dre, I said quietly. He sighed before handing me the brush. I quickly fixed the back of his hair before throwing half of mine into a messy bun and tying my tie. Hey, did you put us to bed last night? Theo asked while struggling with his tie. Yeah, you guys fell asleep in the common room while I was talking to Loki, I replied as he finally fixed his tie. The boys looked perplexed before realization swept across their faces. I gave them a confused look. I think your Parseltongue put us to sleep, Dre said as he grabbed his satchel. The others nodded. Huh, I replied as I grabbed my own and we made our way out of the portrait and to the Great Hall. We made it to our table and saw Nev and my twins. I smiled and went to sit in between them. Hey bro, Nev said as we all took our seats at the table. Oh, nothing much, Dre said as he grabbed some eggs. I laughed. I found out that apparently Parseltongue can put people to sleep, I told Nev with a smile. Really, how'd you find out? Pansy said as she settled at the table. Last night we were all hanging out in the common room having a conversation, and started talking to Loki, and suddenly we were waking up this morning, Blaze said after taking a swig of pumpkin juice. Everyone looked intrigued, although my twins looked a little flustered. Interesting. We continued breakfast as normal when suddenly Weasley stormed into the Great Hall with Purple skin and green hair looking absolutely livid. Granger and little Weasley followed behind with pink skin and silver hair looking equally as livid. I looked over to my twins and noticed they looked smug as hell. I laughed quietly when suddenly the trio of trolls stormed over to our table. Before I could even get a word out, Ron had punched Fred and George and they fell off the bench with a thud. Cirque froze as a monstrous growl ripped from my throat. I lunged at Weasley and immediately started punching him. I had his throat in my left hand as I punched him repeatedly in the face. I couldn't hear Cirque screaming me for me to stop. My one priority was hurting him for having the audacity to hit my twins. Suddenly I felt someone wrap their arms around me and pull me off of him. My magic recognized it as Neville and I stood up. A low growl steady in my throat as me twins were okay. Granger and the little Weasley grabbed Ron and took him to the infirmary. I walked over to them and they looked starstruck. They looked up at me as I crouched down to their level. "Are you two okay, loves?" I asked as I saw the small tears in their eyes. A small purr rumbled in my chest as they nodded. I wiped the tear from their faces and helped them up and back to the table. The great hall was silent as the old goat stood up and told us to get back to breakfast. I had both my arms around my twins' waists, as they slightly leaned on me as they finished their breakfast. Sev was staring me down from the head table with a small fro. I sighed. I would never hear the end of this. But no one has the right to hurt my twins, no one. What is up, dudes? Here is the next chapter. As you can see, things have already started to go sideways. What else is in store for Harry? Keep reading to find out. As always, vote, comment, share. See you later, my dudes. 22. Parseltongue. Thoughts, spells. Fred, George, both twins. Narrator Pav. Harry sat in Snape's office in a quiet rage as he waited for the headmaster to get there. Snape sat across from him, the bridge of his nose pinched between his fingers. Harry was unconsciously clenching and unclenching his fists. Suddenly Snape spoke. "Harry, what on earth provoked a reaction like that?" he said after a long sigh. Harry snapped his head up, and that's when Snape saw it. His eyes weren't the emerald green he was used to seeing. They were almost like fire, with black flecks dancing in them. He gasped, and suddenly he understood the rage and the protectiveness. Harry was a creature, and he was protecting his mates. "Sir, if you want me to be honest, I don't know. It's like as soon as I saw Fred and George get hurt, something in my head snapped and screamed in rage. I had to get rid of the threat, and I had to make sure they were okay," he said after a few seconds of contemplation. Snape nodded at him, and heard the telltale signs of the headmaster's approach. "Harry, I understand that you are beyond angry, but I need you to calm down. The headmaster is on his way, and your eyes are a completely different color," Snape said quietly. Harry took a deep breath, and suddenly his personality switched. Before him was the scared Gryffindor that he had bullied for way too long. Snape sighed quietly, hands back at his face, nose pinched between his fingers as the headmaster walked in. Dumbledore walked into the room like he owned the place, grand. Fatherly smile firmly etched into his face. He made his way across the room and stood next to Snape, before sighing and letting a disappointed look slide onto his face. He let out a sad sigh and Harry looked up, his face a perfect mask of someone who knew they were in trouble. Snape silently congratulated him on his ability to switch into scared Gryffindor so quickly. The headmaster had to suppress a smirk as he looked at the scene before him. The scene in the Great Hall had worried him. He had never seen Harry act so angry. Now, however, he looked like the boy that he had beat into submission. "Hello, Severus, Harry, my boy," he said with a small sad smile. The red-headed boy visibly flinched when he looked up at the headmaster's face. He was shaking. The headmaster suppressed another smirk, perceiving the shaking as fear. Unbeknownst to him, Harry was shaking in silent anger. "Hello, Albus, we seem to have a problem," Severus said in a harsh tone. Harry flinched again. The headmaster sighed and took a seat next to Harry. The redhead had to fight the urge to scoot away from him. "I am aware of that, Severus. I'm sure this is just a one-time thing. Harry has never acted out like this before this," he said in a placating tone. Severus scoffed, and Harry wanted to laugh. "Albus, this may be the first time he has physically got into a fight, but he has broken rules before. Wandering the halls at night, disrupting class, getting into verbal arguments. He has caused his fair share of chaos, the dour man explained with a sneer. Albus sighed again, and folded his hands into his lap. All right Severus my boy, he's in your house now, what do you think the best punishment would be? 2 weeks of detention with me, in the potions lab, Severus said in a tone that obviously left no room for argument. Albus tried his best to keep the anger of his face. Severus was obviously forgetting his place again, and he would have to deal with that later. All right Severus, if that's what you believe is best, I will let you handle this. I however would like to have a few words with Mr. Potter alone. He put stress on the word alone. Albus you know as his head of house, I am allowed to sit in on any talk you decide to have with him, Severus said with a sigh. Rage flashed across the old man's face, and Severus had to keep the smirk of his face. Very well Severus, he said in tight voice, as he looked over to Harry. Harry my boy, what caused such a violent reaction earlier today? You have never acted like that before, he said in a sad voice. Harry looked up with watery eyes, and sighed. Sir, Fred and George are my friends and they pulled an innocent prank. They didn't deserve to get hit over something that small. I wanted to protect them, he said sadly. The headmaster let a small smile cross his face. Still the golden boy then, that was a good thing. I understand that, but you can't just go about starting fights in the Great Hall my boy, he said in a grandfatherly tone. But it's okay for Ron to just punch both his brothers sir, Harry asked with confusion on his face. Of course not, I have already talked to him, and given him his punishment, he said with a smile. Both Severus and Harry highly doubted that. The headmaster stood up, bid them both to have a good day and walked out of Severus' office. The two left waited until they knew for a fact he was gone before they dropped the act. It started as a small giggle, just a quiet snicker, and before long Harry was laughing like a madman. Snape looked on with worry in his eyes as the boy got it all out of his system. It stopped as soon as it started and the redhead looked murderous, his energy wavering around him slightly. So I get punished and talked to like a child, while little Ronnie. The golden child doesn't even get a harsh look, he said with a sneer on his face. Snape sighed. We can't do anything about it at the current moment Harry, you just have to be patient for now, as much as I hate to say that. Snape said tiredly. Harry looked up, faint hues of red in his emerald eyes. I understand Sev, am I good to go back to the dorms? He asked quietly. You are, try not to cause any trouble on your way back. Snape said as he went to grab papers to grade. No promises Sev, the redhead said as he walked out of the office. The potions master watched him go, with a worried look on his face. You can only push him so far Albus, and it's not going to be pretty when he finally snaps, he said with another sigh before starting on grading. A.N. What is up my dudes? Long time no see. Sorry for the awful delay on this chapter. I am trying to get back into updating. Hopefully there won't be another long-ass gap between chapters again. See you guys later. As always, vote, comment, share. See you later my dudes. 23. Parseltongue. Thoughts, spells. Fred, George, both twins. Narrator. The redhead walked back to the dungeons with a cold look set like stone on his face. He walked through the halls quickly glaring at anyone who got in his way. When he finally got to the portrait that led to the common room he hissed out the password and the painting scrambled to open. He walked in and saw all of his friends sitting by the fireplace. They all turned to look when the portrait slammed closed. Draco was the first to his feet when he saw the look on Harry's face. Theo gave the first years a look, and they all retreated to their respective rooms. Harry sat down heavily in the chair closest to the fire, and stared for a bit before Draco caught his attention. Har what happy that look on your face before, Draco said with a worried tone. The red had stared at the fire a bit longer before answering Draco. He talked to me like a child, for protecting my twins. And acted like he was my father. He talked to Sev like he didn't know how to do his job, and Ron doesn't even get a slap on the fucking wrist, he said with a hiss. Blaze almost flinched when he saw the look on his face. I was going to wait to start plotting against that bastard, but I'm done with bloody waiting. The redhead paused and took a deep breath. Draco, Blaze, and Theo looked at him confused before Theo spoke up. What exactly have you got up your sleeve Harry? He asked hesitantly, A wicked grin split the redhead's face. I happen to have multiple reliable sources on what exactly the old goat has done throughout his life. I also have 2 different news outlets that would be more than willing to publish those atrocities to the public, he said with a small laugh at the end. Draco gave Harry an incredulous look. You don't happen to mean Rita and the Quibbler, do you? He asked with a grin forming. The redhead smiled and nodded at him. Theo and Blaise gave each other a look, their own grins forming, before looking back to Harry. Rita already published something that has the public a little wary of Dumbles as it is, why not add a bit of fuel to that fire? Harry asked with a sickly smirk. Draco nodded quickly, Theo and Blaise mimicking him. This is going to be so much fun, Theo said with a grin. Absolutely it will be, Draco said quickly. Time skip . It was time for lunch by the time Harry finished explaining the finer details of his plan to Draco, Theo, and Blaise. They gathered the books they would need for the rest of their classes and exited the common room. They walked to the Gryffindor common room and waited for the twins and Neville to walk out. Harry immediately took the twins' hands in his own. Before they made their way to the Ravenclaw common room to pick up Luna. She was waiting for them right outside and gave Harry a big grin when she saw his hands interlocked with Fred and George. She weaved through the boys so she could walk next to Neville and Pansy, the smile never leaving her face. They made their way through the halls, people from all houses moving to the walls to let them through. When they got to the doors that led to the Great Hall, Harry simply smiled, and the doors opened on their own. He heard one of the twins gasped and laughed to himself. They strode through the doors and made their way to the Slytherin tables, hundreds of eyes watching the group's every move. They took their seats and talked amongst themselves for a bit until Harry felt a tap on his shoulder. He snapped his head to the left and saw Oliver, the little first-year Hufflepuff with tear tracks on his cheeks. I'm sorry for interrupting. He paused and took a breath, but everyone at my table was being really mean. And I was wondering if I could maybe sit with you guys. He asked quietly while looking at his feet. Harry patted his head and made room for him to sit next to George. Of course you can sit with us, Ollie, for as long as you want to, he said with a small smile. The little blonde looked up with the biggest grin on his tear-stained face. Really? Thank you so much. He beamed and sat next to George and wiped his face. George ruffled his hair and helped him get food. Fred reached over Harry and fixed Oliver's tie with a smile. Harry laughed. The group smiled and welcomed Oliver to their table, making him laugh and introducing themselves. Harry made sure he was thoroughly distracted before looking over to the Hufflepuff table. One of Th's 7th years looked at him with shocked eyes, and he glared. The boy flinched hard and snapped his head down to look at his food. He swept his eyes across the table and saw a 5th-year boy who looked scared out of his mind. He smirked, a dark look that had the boy practically shaking in his seat. The boy gulped and looked down at his food quickly, and Harry chuckled before tuning into the conversation that was happening at the table. And Draco was stuck with pink hair for 2 weeks, Blaise said a grin. Oliver was giggling wildy, and Draco was red in the face. In my defense, I didn't know the shampoo would stain. He blurted out, turning more red. You have white hair, Drake. How did you not know? Pansy asked through a laugh. Draco huffed and shook his head before laughing quietly. Harry laughed, and waited for the clocks to chime that signified lunch was over as he ate his food. He had just finished feeding Loki pieces of meat when the clocks tolled. Luna walked over to Oliver and offered to walk him to his classes. He smiled and they headed off. Theo and Blaise headed to Transfiguration. Pansy and Neville followed Luna, and Draco, Harry and the twins headed to Care of Magical Creatures. Dumbledore had no idea what was in store for him, nor was he ready for the backlash it was going to cause. What is up, my dudes? Long time no see. Finally had the time to upload another chapter. Sorry the waits between have been so long. Hopefully I'll have more time to upload in the coming weeks. Hopefully you will enjoy this chapter. As always, vote, comment, share. See you later, my dudes. 24. Breaking news. My dear readers, your favorite reporter has just come across so rather unsettling information that has been kept from the public. Our esteemed Albu, Dumbledore seems to have more than a few skeletons in his closet that he would like to keep to himself. Well, we all know very well that this reporter will not let that happen. I have been provided some very interesting information about your esteemed headmaster. We all remember Grindelwald and the unspeakable things he did. However, something we didn't know was that Albus grew up with the man. They were even friends. Now that is something that I would never have believed if I had not been provided with proof of it. How are we to trust a man that has hidden his past from us? Were they only friends? Did they have something more? Did Albus help Grindelwald? We don't know, but I can promise you that this reporter will do her best to find out. Until next time, my lovely readers. Rita Skeeter, signing off. Less than 3. The great hall was silent, not a movement could be seen. Nobody knew what to think, and then the whispers started. Mostly silent, but grew louder until the great hall was a cacophony of noise. Albus was whiter than a sheet, every teacher at the table glancing at him and then back to the paper. Harry sat at his table, he and Cirque trying to keep their faces blank. However, Harry couldn't help the sick smirk that slithered across his face. Pansy was holding back giggles, and Blaise had to put his face in his crossed arms to keep from laughing. The only person who looked genuinely surprised was poor little Ollie, who looked like a deer caught in the headlights. He looked up to Harry. Is this true?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Harry wiped the smirk off his face and replaced it with a soft smile before responding. "Yeah, Ollie, it is," he replied, just as quietly as Oliver had. Oliver looked up to the table and shook his head. Fred and George watched, surprised at the hard look on the little first-year's face. Suddenly Dumbledore stood up. "Silence," he yelled, with a clap of his hands. The hall went dead silent again, all eyes on Dumbledore. He looked visibly angry, and the entire hall could see it, which only solidified that what everyone had read in the paper was true. He seemed to hesitate before speaking again, seeming to struggle to drag his calm mask back onto his face. "Classes will be starting soon. I suggest everyone get back to eating before they do start. Wouldn't want any of you to go to class hungry." He finished with that god-awful grandfatherly smile. He sat back down, and magicked his new paper away. The hall was silent for only moments later, before whispering broke out again. Everyone tossing glances up to the head table. Blaise fin up from his arms, a smirk smile on his face. "How on earth did you convince her to publish that he asked. Harry smiled, a dark smile that almost didn't belong to his features. "She didn't take much convincing, honestly. She seems to hate that old goat just as much as we do. A little money, and a deal with the Quibbler, and she was more than willing to publish it." Luna smiled at him, and he nodded back at her. Cirque wanted to pretend that Harry convincing her to publish it was surprising. But it wasn't all that surprising. Harry had a way with words that would make anyone want to listen to him. The clocks tolled, and it was time to go to class. It seemed that as a whole the great hall stood to leave. It seemed they were more than happy to be away from Dumbledore after what they had learned. Harry helped Oliver stand and waved to his group. "I'll catch all of you at class. I need to walk Ollie to his first one. Don't want anyone saying anything to him." The group nodded and headed on their way. Fred and George fixed Ollie's tie and hair, before giving Harry a once-over as well. "I'll see you both in potions, my dears." His twins nodded and smiled before making their way to their own class. Harry gestured for Oliver to grab a hold of his robe and they went on their way. "You were the one who gave Ms. Rita that information?" he asked, quietly. Harry quirked an eyebrow down at him before nodding. Oliver paused for a moment before looking back up at Harry. "Is Mr. Dumbledore really a bad person, he asked, eyebrows furrowed. Harry gave the boy a sad smile. "Yes, Ollie, he is. He may be worse than any Dark Lord we've ever had," Harry replied solemnly. Ollie looked up at him shocked, before looking down and tightening the hand on Harry's robe. "You and the others are gonna get rid of him?" he asked, quieter than before. Now this shocked Harry. He looked down to Ollie with an eyebrow raised. The small boy held his gaze, genuinely curious. Harry looked up, debating on answering. Yes, we are," he replied cautiously. The boy nodded at him. "Good. Bad people shouldn't be in charge of other people." This shocked Harry even more. He almost stopped walking. He looked back down at Oliver quickly. The boy looked up, a fire behind his eyes, and smiled. Harry smiled back at him before responding. "You're absolutely right on that one, Ollie, they shouldn't," he replied, a fond smile on his face. They continued walking in silence and they made it to Ollie's class. Harry bid Oliver to have a good day before heading to his class. Skirting rough a few hidden passages on his way as to not be late. Oliver had definitely surprised him. He hadn't expected that from the small Hufflepuff. He wondered how the others would react when he told them what had happened. He guessed he would have to wait to find out. 25. Harry sat in charms, his mind far away from anything that Flitwick was saying. He couldn't help but to think back to the look on Oliver's face. The fire behind his eyes as he said Dumbledore needed to be gone. What in Merlin's name had sparked that? In the time he had known Oliver, he was only ever bouncy, bubbly, and adorable. He wasn't intense. He had even spoken kind words about Dumblefuck, much to the irritation of Harry and the rest of Cirque, though they didn't dare tell Oliver that. They didn't want to upset. The first year they had all grown attached to. Harry pinched the bridge of his nose between his fingers and shook his head. He needed to know what Cirque would think about this. He needed to ask Oliver a few questions. Hopefully the little Hufflepuff wouldn't mind the questions. He also hoped that the questions wouldn't upset the poor kid. He was notoriously quick to get teary-eyed, especially if he thought the group of snakes was mad at him. They needed to avoid that at all cost. They didn't want to lose the little blonde's trust or faith. "Mr. Potter," Flitwick called out, pulling Harry out of his thoughts. He looked up quickly. "Care to demonstrate for the class the spell on the board?" Flitwick asked, eyebrows raised in a disappointed manner. Harry glanced up at the board and almost scoffed. He flicked his wrist slightly and his wand fell into his hand. He stood up and waved his wand in a sharp figure-8 aqua eructo, he said loud and clear. A thin spout of water was produced from the tip of his wand. It shimmered like a waterfall, and Harry dismissed the spell before it hit the floor. He looked up at Flitwick, eyebrow raised in a cocky manner. The professor was really expecting to catch him off guard, it seemed. Flitwick sputtered out words before awarding Slytherin 15 points for Harry's superb display of magic. Harry had to suppress rolling his eyes as he sat back down, ignoring the familiar feeling of eyes burning into the back of his head. More than likely it was Granger, prideful bitch. He assumed she was upset at his ability to do the spell without much effort. He honestly wished she would just forget his existence. Her and the egotistical weasel were getting on the dangerous edge of annoying. He wasn't sure how many more run-ins he could handle without hexing. The both of them till they stopped breathing. This time he did roll his eyes, before glancing back in her direction, and just as he thought she was glaring at him hard, he sent an ice-filled glare at her, his eyes taking on a dangerous shade of green. As soon as she met his eyes she squeaked and buried her head back into the book she was reading. He scoffed and turned back around, at least opening his book so it seemed like he was paying attention. He flipped to the correct page before looking back at the clock, immediately getting lost in thought again. Pause switch . The little blonde Hufflepuff sat quietly in his potions class, listening to all the directions Professor Snape was barking out. He had just finished mixing the sleeping draught for the second time. It needed to rest for exactly 5 minutes, no more no less. He noted the time on the clock above the dour professor's desk. He quietly brought out his quill and ink before hastily scratching down everything he had learned in the Great Hall this morning. He was still mostly shocked about it, and needed to take down his thoughts before they exploded out of him. His mom and dad had always told him how great of a man Mr. Dumbledore was, but if Hazza and all the people he cared about didn't like him, surely he wasn't all that great, right? Hazza wouldn't lie to him. He knew that for a fact. He always answered all of Ollie's questions, and Hazza hated liars. The small boy's eyebrows scrunched together. Hazza had said that they were going to get rid of Mr. Dumbledore, and if he was really that bad then he needed to go. That was just the facts. And he knew that. He also decided right then and there that if Hazza or anyone else needed his help, even for a small thing, he would do it, no questions asked. He underlined that thought twice. It was important. Oliver looked back up at the clock, time to stir in his other ingredients. He didn't want Professor Snape yelling at him. He was scary when he yelled. He finished, adding the necessary ingredients and stirred again, trying desperately to focus on the potion. He didn't want to mess up this late into the assignment. Another rest, this one for 10 minutes, and then the potion would be finished. He looked back to his ramblings and read them over. Nodding as he went along, he pulled out his quill and added one more thing. Maybe the light isn't as righteous and right as they claim to be. He wrote that one in big letters, underlining it for good measure. He folded it up small and put it into the pocket of his pants. He would have to hide it later so no one would find it. Pause switch . Potions had come and gone and it was already almost lunchtime. Harry was getting impatient. He needed to tell Cirque what had happened with Ollie. That, and he knew that Siri had written to him. And he was anxious to see what the letter was about. He was waiting for Hagrid to stop talking and dismiss them so he could leave. He didn't have this class with Anich granted, the puffs were great. But it was a makeup class since he didn't finish it last year. Finally Hagrid dismissed them, and Harry walked as fast as he could without having people stare at him. He made it up to the entrance in record time and slowed down ever so slightly. He made it into the Great Hall and took his seat, and a few of the other Slytherins were making their way to their seats as well. He went ahead and grabbed all the foods that he wanted as he waited. It didn't take long for the rest of his snakes to arrive. Draco gave him a questioning look when he noticed the redhead was there early. Harry waved him off. He waited for the others to get there, and gave a subtle glance at the Hufflepuff table to make sure his twins were sitting with Oliver to keep him distracted. He looked CK towards Cirque and cleared his throat. Their conversation stopped as they looked at him. Something rather interesting happened this morning while I was walking Ollie to potions. The redhead said in a hushed whisper. The others immediately looked concerned. They had all developed a soft spot for the boy. He asked me about the old goat. I told the truth, well, an extremely sugar-coated version. He looked me right in the face with a fire behind his eyes and told me that bad people shouldn't be in charge of other people. Said it was a good thing that we were getting rid of him. He finished, almost quieter than before. The entirety of Cirque was silent, with different ranges of shock on their faces. Pansy was the first to speak. Who are his parents? She asked in a whisper, the others nodding. Muggleborns. Both of them light followers. Harry answered quietly. This only shocked the group more. Theodore looked like his eyes were about to fall out of his head. The next person to speak was Neville, albeit hesitantly. He needs to be at the next meeting. We need to ask him more about this. Harry nodded. My thoughts exactly. The others nodded along, trying to wipe the show. CK off their faces as the redhead waved his twins over. They all started light conversation so as to not alert Ollie that anything was wrong. George sat on his left, Fred on his right, and Ollie sat in between Draco and Neville. Hi Hazza. Hi guys, the petite boy said enthusiastically. The group as a whole seemed to smile at him before saying hello. They included him in all their conversations, Fred, George, and Harry seeming to be in their own world having a near-silent conversation. As it neared time for lunch to end, Fred and George nodded at Harry and the conversation seemed to end. Harry looked up and noticed Ollie was completely caught up in Luna's story about Thestrals and waited for her to finish before speaking. Hey Olivier, I've got a question for you, he said in a kind tone. The little blonde smiled and looked over to Harry. Whatcha got Hazza? He asked with a small bounce. Harry chuckled before answering. So, me and the rest of Cirque are gonna have a little meeting tonight, would you like to come? He asked a little quieter. Oliver looked at Harry like he hung the stars in the sky before nodding excitedly. Yeah, course I would, he said, pure joy in his voice. The redhead smiled a slightly sad smile. All right then, do you think you can manage to sneak out of your dorm at 9:15? Me and Dre will be there to pick you up. Think you can handle not getting caught? Harry asked with a small grin. A determined look planted itself on his face and he nodded again. Absolutely I can Hazza. I will make super sure not to get caught. The redhead smiled at him again and nodded at him. All right then, we will see you at 9:15 on the dot after dinner, Harry said, with a proud look on his face. Oliver nodded determinedly with a smile. Harry watched as he looked at the others and they also smiled at him before conversation started up again. He looked at his twins and they gave him slightly worried looks. They weren't so sure about pulling Oliver into this. But, after Oliver showed them the scrap of paper with his thoughts scrawled on it, they knew it was inevitable. Cirque as a whole needed to know what had gotten into Oliver, and just what he was planning to do. If anything, they didn't want the boy getting hurt, and they would do anything in their power to protect the small boy. He brought life and joy into their otherwise serious group. His smile was contagious and he brightened the rooms that he walked into. Collectively they viewed him as a younger sibling they would do anything for. Merlin helped the poor sod who made the mistake of upsetting the well-protected Hufflepuff. A.N. What is up my dudes? Only took me 2 months to update this time QWQ. I'll get back on a better writing schedule soon, I swear. I finally legitimately have the motivation to actually write again, so yeah. Expect another update soon. 26. Harry and Draco stood quietly at the entrance of the Hufflepuff common room under the invisibility cloak. They arrived early to make sure the coast was clear for Oliver to sneak out. The redhead quietly cast a tempest and saw that it was 9:10. Oliver had 5 minutes left, and Draco assured him the little Hufflepuff would be there. Roughly 2 minutes later Oliver scurried out of the portrait and quietly thanked it. He looked around a bit lost before Harry removed the cloak off of himself and Draco. Oliver smiled wild before quickly walking over to them. I didn't know you had an invisibility cloak, Hazza, he said in an excited whisper as he squeezed between Draco and Harry to fit under the cloak. Rai gave him a small smile before responding. Most people don't, Ollie. You think you can keep that a secret? The redhead asked as he pulled the cloak over them and they started walking. Oliver nodded fiercely and grabbed onto Draco's robe so he could keep up as they made their way to the Slytherin common room. They were mostly quiet on the walk until Draco spoke up. Now Ollie, I know we've asked you to keep a lot of secrets. Would you be willing to keep one for us? Draco asked tentatively as he looked down at Ollie. Yeah, it's like I'm a super secret spy, he replied quickly. Another sad smile crossed Harry's face. He was still completely torn about dragging Oliver into this. Merlin's sake, the boy was just 12, on the other hand though. Wouldn't it be safer for him to know everything they were planning if he already thought the old goat was a bad person? Harry shook his head and sighed quietly. They were just going to have to do a hell of a job of protecting the little ray of sunshine. Draco smiled at Oliver before he spoke. Yeah, you'll be like a super secret spy. Well, the secret that I'm gonna ask you to keep is the fact that you meet with us. I don't think it would be best if people knew you were meeting with us in our common room. Draco said slowly, choosing his words carefully so Oliver wouldn't think he was in danger. Course I can. All of my housemates LD be super jealous if they knew, and we can't have that, he said with a cheek-splitting grin on his face. Harry was almost mystified by the pure amount of wonder in the little Hufflepuff's voice. I didn't think he could recall a time where he was that happy to just be alive and make friends. Yes, that's exactly right. He spoke with his own grin. Everyone would be extremely jealous of you. Yver beamed at him before nodding to himself. They were descending the stairs to the dungeon at the time, so Harry wordlessly cast a heating charm on Oliver's cloak. He didn't want him getting cold. He wasn't used to the dank coldness of the dungeons. Draco gave him a look that clearly read, "You're getting soft," and Harry just stuck his tongue out at him. They made their way deeper into the dungeon. And Oliver clutched Draco's robe tighter. He had never been past the potions classroom. He didn't know what to expect. If he was really honest with himself, he was a little scared. Everything he had heard about the Slytherin common room was from other houses, and they said downright awful things about them. He knew better than to believe people who wouldn't help still being a tad bit afraid. Harry noticed how tight his grip had become on Draco's robe and reached down to ruffle Oliver's hair. He looked up to Harry and smiled. That had definitely helped. They made it to a very large grand portrait of Salazar Slytherin. And Harry removed the cloak off of the three of them. He walked up to the portrait and hissed at it. Oliver's jaw almost hit the floor when the portrait responded and then opened. Harry could speak Parseltongue. That was probably the coolest thing he had ever seen in his entire life. Draco looked down to see the gobsmacked expression on Oliver's face and stifled a chuckle in his fist. That was absolutely the most adorable thing he had ever seen Oliver do if you asked him. Harry turned around halfway and gestured for Oliver to follow him in. Standing slightly in front of him so that any Slytherin who was awake would see that Oliver was with him. He knew they wouldn't say anything, but he would rather not test his overworked luck. He knew without looking back. A second time that Draco was following close behind Oliver to watch their backs, and that made the redhead smile a very small smile. He looked around the common room as they entered and noticed that the only people that weren't Cirque were 6th and 7th years studying. That would be just fine. They had much more pressing things to focus on than a first-year Hufflepuff intruding into their common room. He led Oliver over to the spot he and his group had claimed and stood to the side so they could see Oliver. "Seems our Olivier made it tonight after all," he said as a greeting, watching their faces light up. Oliver looked absolutely thrilled as Harry's twins scooped Oliver into their arms, Pansy and Luna absolutely fawning over him. He smiled for what felt like the 100th time tonight as He took his seat and put up a privacy ward. He could not risk this being overheard, even by his older housemates. He waited for everyone to greet Oliver before starting the meeting. As everyone was retaking their seats, he cleared his throat. "All right, safe to say everyone is ready to get down to business?" he asked, waiting as they all nodded their heads. "Right, good. So first things first, everyone had time to read Oliver's notes to himself. He watched as Oliver tensed a bit. "Oh, don't worry, Ollie," Blaise spoke in a bright tone. "You aren't in trouble and no one is mad at you, swear," he said with the softest smile anyone besides Draco had seen on his face. Everyone nodded along and Oliver relaxed significantly. "I didn't mean to scare you, Olivier. We just wanted to ask you some questions is all." "Would that be okay?" Harry asked softly. Oliver seemed to ponder a bit before nodding enthusiastically. "Course, I'll try to answer 'em as best I can," he replied with another beaming smile. Harry nodded at him before contemplating what to ask him, and how to say it. He didn't want Oliver to think they didn't trust him. "Well, first thing then. This morning when I was walking you to Charms, and you asked me about Dumbledore, what made you decide that bad people shouldn't be in charge of others?" Oliver's eyebrows scrunched together, and he chewed his lip before responding. "'Cause they just shouldn't, right? It doesn't make any sense for someone who's bad to be in charge of people who aren't bad. They shouldn't get to make rules and laws for other people 'cause they probably do it to benefit them. I read a book like that in my mum's library. It's just no good for bad people to get to decide what's good and bad and right and wrong when they are the ones who are bad and wrong, I guess." He finished with a proud smile on his face. Cirque as a collective was absolutely stunned. Whatever they were expecting him to say, it was not that. Theo was the first one to speak up. "Well, by Merlin, you're absolutely right about that one, Ollie. Very well spoken too," he said with a kind smile. "Yeah, good job, Ollie," Neville replied with a small laugh. Oliver looked absolutely ecstatic. He was excited beyond belief. Fred was the one who spoke next. "About the note you wrote yourself, what sparked all of that, kiddo?" he asked. Oliver paused to think again, trying his best to get all of his thoughts in order before speaking. "Well, Hazza said that Mr. Dumbledore was a bad person, and from what I can tell he's in charge of a whole bunch of important things. Hazza has never lied to me ever. And if he says that Mr. Dumbledore needs to go, he does. It's not right for him to parade around like some monarch. It's not right for him to parade around like a monarch. And make all these decisions and laws and rules for everyone when his views are skewed. I think that's the right word. How come he gets to decide what's light and dark when he's the one who has a real nasty bias against things? Just 'cause some things are classified as dark doesn't really mean they can't be good. So, if you guys say he needs to be gone, he does, and if I can help, I wanna." He finished, chewing on his lip again. Everyone was stunned. It was quiet enough in their corner that you could hear a pin drop. Draco's mouth was hung open in absolute shock. Harry couldn't help the grin that spread across his face. "Albeit very slowly, you might be the smartest 12-year-old I've ever met, Olivier," he said, the smile evident in his voice. Oliver looked at him in absolute wonder. That was the nicest thing anyone had ever said about him. "Well then, it's safe to assume you're stuck in our little group from here on out, aren't you?" Draco asked after he got over his shock. Ollie. Veer nodded so quickly everyone thought he was going to get whiplash. Harry's twins were beaming, as was everyone else in the room. I can't promise we'll let you help us just yet, however, I can promise that if we ever need your help we'll tell you as soon as we can. That all right with you? Pansy asked. Yeah, that's perfect, he replied, a smile still firmly planted on his face. Harry nodded to himself. They would need to keep a very close eye on him from now on. They would not hesitate to hurt anyone who even breathed in his direction wrong. Right then, since we've got that matter settled, consider this your first official meeting, Ollie, Harry said, watching as Ollie nodded with a serious look on his face. All right, the only things we have left to discuss are Rita's next headline and series letter. Rita has all the information she needs to publish within the week. This issue will be all about Grindelwald and the old goat's relationship growing up. I believe she even managed to D.G. up some pictures with the help of the goblins. Luna, will your dad be ready to publish something sometime this week? He asked his adopted sister. Yes, he absolutely will, he just got his new shipment of ink and parchment yesterday. He says he's absolutely thrilled to be helping us, she said with a dreamy smile. Harry smiled back and nodded. Let him know he has our thanks and that if he owls me the invoice for the supplies I will cover them for him. Luna nodded and quickly penned that down in her journal. Last thing for tonight, Siri says that Marvolo is planning a bit of a get-together next weekend. He says that if we aren't busy with homework or getting necessities from Hogsmeade we are all invited to attend. No dress code, just a casual meeting. Ollie, I'm sorry but this isn't so. Mething I'm comfortable with you attending just yet. It would be far too easy for someone to notice you're gone, Harry said with a sad smile. Oliver deflated a bit before nodding to himself. That's okay, Hazza. If you say I'm not ready then that's okay. I'll probably have a bunch of homework from Professor Snape anyways, he said confidently. The group smiled at him, he really was dedicated to this already. Harry nodded at him. Thanks for being so understanding. That's all that I've got. Has anyone got anything else? No one said anything so Harry nodded. All right kiddo, you want Draco and I to walk you back or would you like my twins to walk you back if they're up for it? Fred and George looked absolutely would even suggest that they wouldn't want to do it, and Harry laughed. Can Gred and Forge do it? Please please please, he asked with a bounce. Of course we can, George said, swinging Ollie to his feet. We'd be delighted to, Fred said, gesturing to Harry for the cloak. He handed it over to them immediately with a smile. Anything for his twins. Don't get caught, and I'll see you both tomorrow at breakfast, Harry said as they wrapped the cloak around the th.re of themselves and headed towards the exit. Harry dispelled the privacy ward as Neville and Luna were saying their goodbyes and settled heavily in his chair. The meeting went well but it only made his worry for Oliver worse. He had no idea what was in store for him, let alone his group. Theo walked up beside him and set a hand on his shoulder. It's too late at night for you to be worrying this much, come on. We all need to go to bed if we want any shot of getting up on time in the morning. Harry nodded at him before standing up and gathering his things to head to their bedroom. He couldn't wait to watch everything Dumbledore held dear crash and burn to the fucking ground. Fireplace.